Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we follow the candlelit trail into the perfumed yet perilous corridors of the Ming Dynasty's Forbidden City. Behind the vermilion walls lies a world of power games, whispered secrets, and lives so carefully choreographed that one wrong glance could mean exile or worse. But tonight, our story begins far beyond those walls, in a rice farming village, with a boy whose life is about to be traded for silver and fate. One caution though, they probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun has barely risen over the mist-covered paddies when the boy is pulled from sleep. His name is Jin, though it won't matter for long. Names are slippery things in this part of China, especially when they're about to be forgotten. His family's hut smells of damp bamboo and boiled taro root. Chickens stir outside. His mother folds his worn cotton tunic with unusually careful fingers. His father stands in the doorway, silent and unreadable like stone. There's no crying, no pleading, only the rustle of coins exchanging hands with a travelling agent from the capital. The agent, dressed in dark robes and carrying a slim wooden ledger, doesn't look like much. But in his scroll case are lists of children, orphans, debt pawns, and occasionally sons like Jin. Sons whose families cannot feed another mouth. Sons whose testicles are worth more than their future. The Ming Dynasty, in all its opulence, relies on a shadow caste to maintain its illusion of divine order. Eunuchs, neither fully men nor fully servants, run the palace like veins beneath imperial skin. They clean, they spy, they manage scrolls and seduce secrets, and they are always watching. Jin doesn't know this yet. As he walks away from his home, a single cloth bundle tied to a stick, he only knows that he's going to serve the emperor. That sounds important. Maybe he'll wear silks, maybe he'll ride a horse. He doesn't ask why he's forbidden to speak during the journey, or why the older boys whisper about knives and bowls of snow. 3 days later, they arrive in the outskirts of Beijing where the palace begins, not with golden dragons but with dirty alleys and high walls. They're held in a plain compound with barred windows and no mirrors. It's filled with boys like Jin, between 6 and 10, each assigned a number and stripped of their clothing. The youngest sob quietly at night. The older ones hum lullabies to themselves. Everyone knows what comes next. The castration is done with ceremonial carelessness. A man known only as the Knife performs it, sometimes sober. They say he was once a butcher. Jin is held down on a wooden bench, his legs bound with hemp rope. His arms are pinned by 2 senior eunuchs. There's a bowl of alcohol, a silver scalpel, and a grimy rag. No anaesthetic, just biting leather and whispered prayers. It's over in seconds, at least the cutting. The recovery takes weeks. Some boys die. Infection, blood loss, shock. Jin survives. Barely. They pack the wound with ash and herbs. He walks bow-legged for a month. His voice, once high and clear, now floats with a hollow tremble. He is fed gruel and lotus root, taught to keep quiet, to bow properly, to walk without echo. The older eunuchs tell them stories of what happens to those who disobey. One was boiled alive, another sewn into a sack and tossed in the moat. Are these true? Maybe. Historians still argue whether some of these executions were real or palace rumour, but fear doesn't care about footnotes. Once healed, Jin is issued a uniform, simple grey silk with a red belt. His head is shaved, save for a tuft that's folded under a cap. He looks in a copper basin to see his reflection, but it's blurry, warped. He doesn't recognise himself. No one ever will again. He's taken to a low hall with carved eaves, where new eunuchs are sorted like laundry. There are 3 primary tracks: cleaners, cooks, and administrative aides. Jin is assigned to the last, due to his quietness and steady hands. A scribe enters his name in the palace registry. It is not Jin. It is now simply Boy 437. His past is erased with the stroke of a bamboo brush. His duties begin in the outer court, organising scrolls, fetching ink, sweeping thresholds, without stepping on engraved dragons. 1 foot on imperial imagery and your foot might go missing. The rules are endless. Don't look royalty in the eyes. Don't speak unless spoken to, and never, never listen at doors unless commanded. Yet everyone listens. The Forbidden City breathes secrets. Its corridors twist like intestines, red lacquered beams humming with the weight of invisible eyes. Jin delivers messages between ministers and eunuch supervisors, learning to read the tone of a cough, the tilt of a robe. He notices that some scrolls are warm when delivered, meaning they were just written in a hurry, usually with panic. Others are cold, laced with perfume dust, rehearsed and calculated. One day, while cleaning a side chamber, he sees a strange scene. 2 eunuchs bowing to a slab of polished stone, whispering prayers. Later he learns that the stone is said to trap the voices of executed officials. If you press your ear to it, you can still hear them crying. Probably superstition. Then again, the next morning Jin passes the same room and hears weeping. No one else is there. He learns that eunuchs play games too, not just for power, but for survival. Small favours are traded like currency. A square of candied ginger, a warning before a patrol, a scroll slipped back into the correct rack after a late-night peek. Jin keeps his head down, but his ears open. He survives. One evening, a messenger rushes into the scriptorium with an urgent scroll. Jin is chosen to deliver it to the Hall of Supreme Harmony. As he walks under the massive doors, past gilded lion statues and incense burners the size of bathtubs, something shifts. The air is heavier, more watched. He doesn't know it yet, but this is the beginning of his ascent. Not because of ambition, he hasn't earned that, but because someone inside has noticed him. He catches the eye of a senior eunuch named Lu Gao, a thin, owl-like man with rings on every finger and a habit of humming while walking. Lu Gao says nothing, just nods. Days later, Jin is reassigned to the inner court, the place where concubines drift like ghosts, where power wears perfume and smiles lie deeper than swords. And as Jin is led through the archway, past the silk curtains that separate the known world from what lies within, he feels something tighten in his chest. Not fear exactly, not even excitement, just the sense that he is no longer a child, no longer a name. He is now a thread in the grand tapestry of the Ming Palace, silent, subtle, and slowly tightening. Inside the inner court, everything whispers. The architecture itself seems designed to muffle steps, absorb sound, and conceal secrets in every fold of silk and shadow. Jin follows Lu Gao through narrow courtyards, past hanging lanterns and moon gates carved with phoenixes. The air here is perfumed, but not sweet. It smells of dried osmanthus, powdered pearl, and something bitter beneath it all, like old medicine or grief that refuses to leave. Lu Gao assigns Jin to the Pavilion of Celestial Harmony, a mid-tier hall where lower-ranked concubines dwell. The boy is given a new robe, paler in colour and edged with white thread, and told his tasks will involve laundry, message delivery and general assistance to the female attendants. He is to look at no one directly, especially not the consorts, and if summoned, he is to kneel and speak in the third person, always, always, with eyes downcast. It is here, amid the rustling of embroidered gowns and the clinking of jade hairpins, that Jin begins to understand the peculiar power of being invisible. He moves through the hallways like mist, carrying trays of lotus seed cakes, fetching ointments, heating water for foot baths. He listens. Not intentionally, he's trained not to, but in the palace, secrets are as common as dust, and just as impossible not to breathe in. Concubines whisper alliances, chambermaids trade gossip like gold. One consort, pregnant with what she hopes is a boy, bribes a physician to lie about another woman's illness. Jin sees this. Jin notes which cups are swapped, which silks are snubbed. The Empress herself passes by one day. Her robes trail like a painted river, and a dozen maids follow behind her like shadows. Jin kneels instantly, forehead pressed to the marble floor, but he can feel her gaze flick across him, a glance sharp enough to cut silk. Life here is ordered but tense. The palace runs on a precise schedule, morning ablutions, midday meals, evening rituals. But beneath the surface, it's chaos in slow motion. Every woman here is locked in competition for the Emperor's attention. A single night with him could mean a son, and a son means power, until the next son is born. Eunuchs like Jin are caught in this endless ballet, gliding between chambers as silent intermediaries, witnesses to cruelty and kindness alike. One day, he is sent to deliver a lacquered box to the Hall of Fragrant Petals. It's said to house one of the Emperor's favourite consorts, Lady Jen. She's rumoured to be both beautiful and vicious. Her voice is like bells dipped in venom. She doesn't look at Jin when he arrives, just waves him forward with a flick of a jewelled hand. He sets the box down, bows low, and turns to leave. Then she speaks. "You walk softly, like you've been here before." Jin doesn't respond. He cannot. But the comment lingers. Days pass and Lady Jen begins requesting him by name. Well, by number. Send the quiet one, the one with the mouse eyes. At first it's odd tasks, fetching her favourite tea blend from a distant wing, delivering sealed notes to a court musician. Then she begins asking questions, harmless things at first, where certain women take their meals, who speaks with whom. Jin answers sparingly. He's careful. But Lady Jen knows how to tease out information without ever making it feel like betrayal. Soon, Jin realises he's become a spy, or something close to it. Not officially, of course. There's no badge, no title. Just a growing list of things he knows and a mounting pressure to keep it all inside. He knows which lady hides a dagger in her pillowcase, which eunuch trades salt pork for foreign perfume, which consort was seen crying after her night with the Emperor, not from joy, but from fear. Historians still debate how much influence eunuchs held in the personal affairs of the inner court. Some say they were merely servants, conduits for gossip with no real leverage. Others argue they were key players, manipulating relationships and tipping the scales with a well-placed whisper. Jin, if he were to answer, might say it's both. Power is never official in the Forbidden City. It's a smoke ring, a scent trail, a shifting breeze. Late one night, Jin overhears something he shouldn't. He's delivering warm towels to the Pavilion of Plum Blossoms when he hears voices inside. The door is slightly ajar. Inside, two women whisper urgently. One of them is Lady Jen. She can't bear a child. The midwife said so. The Emperor must not know. And if he favours her again, then he'll waste another year. That's enough time to bury her. Jin leaves silently. He delivers the towels. But now he carries something else. Something heavier than trays or scrolls. A secret that could end a life. He considers telling Lu Gao but thinks better of it. Instead, he begins to keep a mental ledger. Who's scheming? Who's fading? Who might rise if someone else fell? This knowledge becomes his currency. Weeks pass. The seasons change. Snow dusts the courtyards, and the concubines don fur-lined robes. Jin now knows how to interpret a glance, a cough, a single clipped syllable. He no longer startles at sudden screams in the night or the dull thud of a body being dragged. He knows not to ask where the missing girl went or why her chamber now houses a different consort with the same favoured scent. He's older now, perhaps 10 or 11. Age blurs inside the palace. There are no birthdays, no seasonal festivals, only the rhythm of survival. And survival, it turns out, has a sound. The faint hiss of silks, the slap of slippers on stone, the rustle of scrolls, the quiet cry of someone realising they are no longer the favourite. Jin begins to grow taller. His limbs stretch, his face sharpens. He speaks rarely but listens always. One afternoon, while assisting an elderly eunuch in the archive hall, he stumbles upon a hidden door behind a shelf of astrology scrolls. Inside is a narrow room filled with coded documents, rumours collected from across the empire, bandit movements, merchant bribes, seditious poetry. The eunuch notices Jin staring. Curiosity is dangerous, the old man mutters, sealing the door. But useful. It's a test. And Jin passes. He's invited to serve in the intelligence pavilion, a rare honour for someone his age. Here, eunuchs manage the palace's vast information network, sorting reports, eavesdropping on nobles, even intercepting letters. It's a dark art, and Jin learns quickly. Ink is more lethal than daggers. A single altered phrase in a dispatch can shift policy. A rumour placed in the right ear can ruin a career or a life. Jin doesn't ask why he was chosen. Perhaps it's his silence. Perhaps Lady Jen's influence. Perhaps someone far above decided to keep an eye on him. It doesn't matter. He adapts. By now, he is almost unrecognisable from the boy who left his village. He moves with purpose. He speaks with precision. He forgets his own voice when not in use. His original name is a faint echo, like a forgotten tune. Still, sometimes, in the quiet hours between lantern light and sunrise, he remembers the smell of earth after rain, his mother's hands calloused and warm, a rooster's cry. Then he folds the memories away like an unused robe. In the palace, nostalgia is a liability. One day, while delivering a ciphered report to a senior eunuch, Jin passes the emperor himself. It happens in a corridor flanked by golden tiles and carved dragons. Jin kneels instantly, head to floor. The emperor walks slowly, surrounded by ministers, his robes embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, the symbol of absolute authority. Jin dares not lift his eyes, but he can feel the heat of that presence, the weight of it. And just for a second the emperor pauses. "A silent one," he murmurs. "Good." Then he moves on. It's nothing, a single breath of attention. But in the palace, even the emperor's glance is a thunderclap. Jin's life shifts that day. His name, still not Jin, is entered on a new registry, one for those under consideration. Not quite favoured, but seen. And being seen is the first step towards something more dangerous than obscurity. Relevance. Life in the Forbidden City is never truly still, though it moves with the practiced grace of a calligrapher's brush. For Jin, now assigned to the intelligence pavilion and brushed by imperial notice, the rhythm of his days changes subtly, but unmistakably. His tasks become more nuanced, less about physical labour, and more about the fine art of observation. He begins receiving sealed instructions written in cryptic metaphors. One morning it's, "Watch the jasmine for signs of frost." Another day it's, "The crane that flies too high meets the sun." He understands enough to know what's being asked. Find out who's climbing too fast. Report what you see, but never, ever be seen doing it. By the time he's 13, he's fluent in the dialect of discretion. He learns to read lips from across courtyards, interpret the meanings behind gifts left on thresholds, and memorise the daily movements of those deemed sensitive. He maps not just spaces, but relationships. A jade comb placed in the wrong pavilion, a signal, a bowl of untouched porridge, a warning. Nothing is ever random here. The eunuchs of the intelligence pavilion operate like monks crossed with spiders, spinning webs of whispers across the palace. Each has a specialty, some in foreign news, some in noble households, others in dreams and omens. Jin's mentor, an aged eunuch with cataract-clouded eyes, tells him, "Information is ink. Make sure your brush never slips." Jin's particular talent is memory. He can recall the exact wording of conversations he's heard days earlier, the precise placement of hairpins on a consort's head, even the order of dishes served at a diplomatic banquet. This makes him invaluable and dangerous. Senior eunuchs begin taking notice. Some invite him for tea, others begin avoiding eye contact. One tries to send him on a diplomatic errand to a distant outpost, an obvious ploy to remove a rival. Jin declines politely, citing the orders of higher powers. His world becomes smaller and yet more expansive. He's granted limited access to the Hall of Records, where ancient texts are stored alongside more contemporary secrets. Here, he learns the history of eunuchs before him, Zheng He, the famed admiral who led voyages across the oceans, Wang Zhen, who nearly steered the empire into ruin. The legacy of eunuchs is a seesaw of reverence and revulsion. Historians still argue whether they were saviours or saboteurs. Jin reads their stories not with awe, but with caution. Despite his rising status, he still lives humbly. His chamber is a narrow alcove near the northeast garden wall, shared with 2 junior aides who snore in turns and smell of pickled radish. He eats simply, steamed millet, salted duck egg, and occasionally a sliver of candied melon if a superior is feeling generous. But luxury doesn't tempt him. Not yet. Power is subtler than brocade robes or feasts. It's being able to walk freely where others cannot, to know things others wish to hide. One rainy evening he's summoned to an unusual meeting. It's held in the Hall of Purifying Wind, a quiet side hall used for meditation, and, unofficially, the Emperor's most discreet inquiries. The room is empty except for 3 individuals. Lu Gao, still elegant and dangerous, an unnamed official in a black cloak, and Lady Zhen, veiled in blue and pacing like a caged leopard. "You are the one who listens," the official says without preamble. Jin bows low. "There is a matter of interest," the official continues. "A consort, Lady May, is said to have received correspondence from outside the capital. Her family has fallen out of favour, yet she remains unusually well informed. Lady Jen's voice cuts in. She's a snake. She knew about the grain tax delay before I did. Lugao clears his throat. We believe there may be a smuggling of information, possibly through her chambermaid. Jin is given a task: confirm the communication, find the conduit, do not confront, do not reveal himself, just watch. It's what he does best. He spends the next several days observing Lady May's quarters. The woman is clever, beautiful in a restrained, almost architectural way, all angles and symmetry. She speaks rarely, and when she does, it's in veiled references. But Jin notices her chambermaid visits the kitchen at odd hours, always returns with the same folded cloth wrapped around a bundle of ginger. Too consistent. One evening Jin follows her from a distance. The maid meets a gardener near the east wall, hands him the bundle. Jin follows the gardener, who stops near the koi pond and tosses something into the water, intentionally, not carelessly. Jin waits until dawn to return, retrieves the soaked parcel from between stones. A letter, smeared but legible, addressed to a merchant in Hangzhou. It contains subtle but valuable court gossip, the kind that could shift markets and strategies. He presents the evidence. The chambermaid disappears. Lady May falls ill, officially from grief. Unofficially, her family estate is seized and her titles are reduced. Lady Jen's chamber smells of incense and victory for a week. For his success, Jin is rewarded with a promotion. He's now a personal courier for Lugao himself, with access to inner strategy meetings and proximity to the Emperor's council. But with elevation comes peril. He begins noticing strange glances from another rising eunuch, Xie Bao, a man with the soft voice of a monk and the memory of a trap. Xie smiles too much, compliments too easily. He once left a lotus cake in Jin's room. A kindness, or a test. One morning Jin discovers that one of his reports has been altered. A name changed, a phrase softened. He confronts his copying assistant, who swears innocence. Lugao grows cold toward him, suspicious. Jin must move carefully. He orchestrates a counter-move. He plants a document in Xie Bao's chamber, a forged letter suggesting collusion with an exiled prince. Within a week, Xie is arrested for questioning. Torture? Maybe. All Jin knows is that he never sees him again. The lesson is clear. Silence is not enough. One must be invisible and untouchable. A ghost in embroidered slippers. By now, Jin is 16. He's seen more schemes than most ministers twice his age. He's learned that loyalty in the Forbidden City is always conditional, and friendships are seasonal at best. He keeps his emotions folded tightly, like his robes. He dreams rarely. When he does, it's of roads without walls, skies without lanterns. Occasionally, though, he allows himself small rebellions. He feeds crumbs to the courtyard sparrows. He slips treats to the kitchen girls. He memorizes poems carved into old beams by forgotten hands, some of them from eunuchs long dead. One reads, "I had a name once. It melted like snow in tea. No one remembers." Still, the palace watches, and Jin watches back. One afternoon, while reviewing foreign tribute records, Jin finds an inconsistency. A shipment from Annam includes a jewel-studded relic box that never appears in inventory. He investigates quietly, tracing the crate to a minor official's ledger, then no further. It's vanished, stolen likely, or hidden. He informs Lugao. A few days later, the official is reassigned to a grain bureau in the northern frontier. No trial, no mention, just snow and silence. Jin begins to feel something creeping in, a fatigue not of the body but of the soul. He starts to wonder if every secret guarded is another brick in a wall between him and whatever's left of the world outside. Still, he serves, because serving is safer than stopping, because stopping means remembering, and memory is a door best left closed. But then, one night that door cracks. It happens during the Lantern Festival. The palace is aglow with paper lights, and the air smells of sesame and laughter. Jin, off-duty briefly, walks the perimeter of the gardens. He hears a song, a simple village tune played on a flute. The melody catches in his throat. It's the same lullaby his mother used to hum while cooking rice. He follows the sound. It's a gardener, old and nearly blind, sitting near the koi pond. "Nice breeze," the man says without turning. "Smells like harvest." Jin sits beside him silently. "Where you from, boy?" "I don't remember," the man chuckles. "Good. Remembering things gets you in trouble here." Jin watches the lanterns flicker over the water. In that moment he feels both utterly alone and completely seen. Not as a eunuch, not as a tool, but as something vaguely human. A boy who once had a name. The moment passes. The music fades. Jin returns to the inner court before dawn. Back to his scrolls, his codes, his roles. But something has shifted. He's no longer simply surviving. Now, somewhere deep beneath the silken silence, a seed has been planted. A seed that remembers. Morning breaks through the slit windows of the intelligence pavilion, spilling soft gold over rows of scrolls and sealed boxes. Jin is already awake, already dressed, already moving through the silent stone corridors with the fluidity of someone who has lived too long in the hushed belly of the Forbidden City. He carries a lacquered box filled with petitions from provincial governors, most of them bribes hidden in language thick as plum syrup. His fingers, delicate and sure, handle the parchment with the reverence one might offer to something sacred. Or radioactive. Life in the inner court has taken on a rhythm as intricate as the embroidered dragons on the Emperor's robes. Jin now walks paths only the trusted may tread, his slippers muffled on polished wood, his presence acknowledged with faint nods or nothing at all. To be unnoticed is a skill honed to perfection, and yet as the seasons shift he finds himself noticed more often than he likes. A senior eunuch named Tao Li begins speaking to him overlong, complimenting his memory, asking leading questions. "Have you ever thought of overseeing the Book of Ceremonies? Do you believe Lady Jen is truly secure in her position?" These are not casual inquiries. They are snares, subtle tests of loyalty and intent. Jin responds with bland politeness, like sipping tea that might be poisoned. Tao Li is ambitious. His loyalty is fluid as ink on wet silk, and he's not alone. The eunuch hierarchy is a study in invisible warfare. Titles shift like sand, and allegiances are bought with information, favours, and the occasional convenient disappearance. Jin's own mentor, Lu Gao, grows more reclusive, his once sharp presence beginning to fade at court. He coughs often now, blood sometimes staining the handkerchief he tries to hide. Rumours ripple that he's fallen out of favour, that a rival has whispered something treacherous into the Emperor's ear, that he's planning one last move before vanishing. Jin watches closely. Meanwhile, a new power vacuum opens in the Pavilion of Serene Fragrance. A senior concubine dies suddenly. Chest pains, they say. But Jin overhears a court physician whisper to his assistant that her lips were tinged with blue. The implication is clear. Poison. Whether self-administered or gifted is left unsaid. Her death sends ripples through the inner court. Rooms are reassigned, favour recalibrated, and through it all, Lady Jen remains calm, polished, unreadable. She sends Jin a folded note sealed in wax. The moon does not chase fireflies, but it sees them. He burns the message after reading it. He knows she's reminding him. She watches too. Jin is reassigned briefly to the Pavilion of Written Petals, where he's to oversee the scrollwork of the Empress herself, a ceremonial duty but one that places him near the apex of court ritual. The Empress is a quiet, observant woman with the weary grace of someone always waiting for her title to mean something more than ornament. She rarely speaks, but when she does, it carries the weight of a temple bell. During one ritual reading, Jin notices her lingering on a petition from a border province, a request for more grain due to flooding, a minor matter, easily overlooked. But she reads it twice, then sets it aside with a slight crease in her brow. Later that day, Jin cross-references flood reports and finds inconsistencies. Either the petition is false, or someone is hiding a crisis. He reports it discreetly through Lu Gao, who seems both proud and resigned. "You see too much," the older eunuch mutters, eyes dim with exhaustion. "That will save you, or it will end you." That night, Jin dreams of water, rising, endless, swallowing the crimson halls of the Forbidden City in a single, silent wave. He wakes before dawn, heart pounding, and sits beside his window until the stars fade. A week later, the Emperor summons a private council to address food shortages. Jin is present, standing at the edge of the room, barely acknowledged. He listens as ministers debate. Blame shifts like a game of shuttlecock, and solutions are proposed that do nothing but inflate egos. One minister suggests reducing rations for eunuchs to compensate. Another recommends taxing incense offerings in temples. The emperor laughs once short and sharp, then grows silent. Then he speaks. Perhaps the eunuchs have better ideas. They seem to know more than my ministers these days. A pause. All eyes shift, briefly, to Jin. He bows, silent, and offers nothing. Later, Lu Gao tells him, that was not a compliment. It was a warning. Still, the council leads to minor reforms, and the petition Jin flagged is quietly investigated. Grain is rerouted. No credit is given to him, but he doesn't want it. Invisibility remains his best defense. It's around this time that Jin begins keeping a private ledger, not official, not sanctioned, just a record of people, where they are, who they visit, how they change. He writes it in a cipher of his own making, burying it beneath a loose tile in his chamber. It's not for leverage, not yet. It's a way to feel control in a place where control is a myth wrapped in brocade. He watches as another faction rises, a cluster of younger eunuchs led by Tao Li and his ilk, eager, charming, vicious beneath the silk. They throw small feasts, flatter minor officials, offer gifts to overlooked ministers. They use laughter like a blade. Jin refuses their invitations politely. He knows their rise will end in one of two ways, absorption or annihilation. But for now, they shine too brightly for anyone to touch. One day, while delivering scrolls near the Imperial Garden, Jin notices something odd, a gardener replacing stones along a path with too much care. Jin waits until dusk, returns, and finds a hidden note under one of the rocks. It's a list of names, familiar ones, eunuchs, ministers, concubines, some crossed out, some circled. He reports it carefully. The investigation leads to the discovery of a small ring of informants, people smuggling court information to a noble faction in the south. Quiet arrests follow. Jin watches as the ripple spreads, careful to step only where the water has settled. He is promoted again. His new title places him near the Council of Rights, managing ceremonial correspondence, foreign tribute records, and imperial birthday logistics. It sounds dull. It is not. The Bureau of Rights is the empire's facade. It determines who bows where, who wears what, whose ancestors are honoured and whose are forgotten. Jin discovers that through ritual one can move mountains. He learns to manipulate seating charts subtly, to shift ceremonial order so that one official kneels before another, signalling dominance or submission. He plants errors in draft programs, always fixable, always innocent, that hint at changing tides. One foreign ambassador takes offence when he's listed below arrival from Korea. A marriage alliance is quietly scrapped. These things matter. Still, Jin remains cautious. The higher he climbs, the less he trusts anyone. His contact with Lady Jen becomes infrequent, though each interaction is laced with layers. Once, she sends him a comb, silver and plain. "No message?" he asks. She smiles faintly. "You already know what it means." He does. A comb in her province signifies parting, not forever, but a shift. And indeed, rumours swirl that the Emperor's affection is drifting toward a new concubine, one younger, less calculating, more sincere in her ignorance. Lady Jen begins to withdraw. She starts offering incense at dawn, visiting the imperial astrologers, and spending long hours alone. She's playing a longer game, Jin suspects, or losing one. Meanwhile, Lu Gao collapses during a morning inspection. He's carried to the infirmary, breath rattling. Jin visits once. The old man grips his hand, whispering something about a box, a book, and not yet. Then he sleeps, or dies. It's never made clear. His room is sealed the next day. Jin inherits some of his responsibilities, not by decree, but by momentum. Others defer to him, out of habit, fear, or calculated respect. He now signs documents, seals dispatches, redirects investigations, but never publicly. His name never appears in ledgers. He is still a ghost. Then one evening a page brings him a letter with no seal. He opens it carefully. Inside, a single phrase. The brush that writes the truth must never rest. No signature, no mark, just black ink on yellowed paper. He burns it slowly, watching the flame eat each stroke. Snow falls over the forbidden city in gentle, deliberate flakes, softening its sharp angles and muting even the faintest echo of slippered feet. Winter in the palace is less a season and more a tightening of robes, of ranks, of ambitions gone brittle with cold. Fires burn behind gilded screens, servants carry hot coals in bronze braziers, and the eunuchs of the inner court begin their quiet migration indoors, following warmth and whispers like cats in smoke. Jin, now in his early 20s, no longer rushes. He walks the halls with practised calm, his hands always tucked neatly in his sleeves, his eyes trained just low enough to avoid arrogance. He carries no outward insignia of rank, yet doors open for him. Couriers move aside. He has become part of the architecture, essential, unobtrusive, omnipresent. He now serves directly under the chief eunuch of palace operations, a round-faced man named Sunday, whose public persona is one of clumsy affability. In truth, Sunday is as calculating as a chess master 3 moves ahead. He calls Jin his little scribe, a harmless nickname used in front of others to disguise the fact that Jin now drafts most of his correspondence, arranges his meetings, and in a handful of cases edits the imperial responses before they're even shown to the emperor. Not that the emperor notices. He's growing older, slower. His nights are spent more in ceremony than passion, and his decrees, once sharp as jade, have become riddled with indecision. Ministers bicker, concubines manoeuvre, and behind them all the eunuchs maintain order with gloved hands and veiled glances. Jin has long since stopped marvelling at the strange ballet of the inner court. He observes it now like a weathered astronomer tracking constellations, impersonal, precise, quietly aware that stars often collapse long before anyone notices. The Empress has withdrawn from most rituals, citing headaches. Lady Jen has aged with remarkable elegance, but her power wanes visibly. And the new favourite, Consort Lan, is young, beautiful, and blissfully naive. Or so she pretends. Consort Lan has a habit of asking too many questions. Jin is summoned to her pavilion one afternoon under the pretence of clarifying a ceremonial error. She sits behind a screen, her voice soft, almost musical. "They say you know everything, eunuch," she begins. "Is that true?" "No one knows everything, your highness," she laughs. "But you know enough. Enough to avoid enemies. Enough to survive." He says nothing. Then she leans forward, voice lower. "I want to understand what power looks like. Not in books. In people that, Jin thinks, is a dangerous curiosity." But he merely bows and offers her a bland explanation about rank, lineage, and ritual precedents. She accepts it with a smile that says she doesn't believe a word. He leaves her pavilion that day with a sense of unease. Not because she is dangerous yet, but because she is attentive. And attention, in the palace, is a weapon. Outside, whispers have begun to drift in from the provinces. Bandits along the Yangtze, a tax rebellion in the southwest, a famine that's been downplayed in reports but smells suspiciously like policy failure. Jin reads dispatches in the dead of night, calculating patterns. He sees too many accidental fires, too many unexpected deaths. A quiet unrest is swelling, but the capital is wrapped in velvet and denial. One evening, Sunday invites Jin to a private dinner. Not a formal affair, just steamed dumplings, pickled vegetables and chrysanthemum wine. It's the kind of meeting that matters more than the ones in council halls. "You're too quiet lately," Sun says, sipping his wine with exaggerated pleasure. "The palace is shifting, you feel it, yes?" Jin nods. "Things settle before they slide," Sun chuckles. "Or they rot before they fall apart. Same smell, different pace." He pauses, then leans in. "If you had to choose, order or truth, which would you protect?" Jin considers. The question isn't hypothetical. Not here. Not from Sunday. "Order preserves lives," he says slowly. "Truth ruins them." Sun raises his cup in approval. "Good answer. Just remember which one pays your salary." The next week, a minor scandal erupts. A tribute envoy from the west arrives with goldwork figurines, each one allegedly representing local deities. But one figurine bears a suspicious resemblance to an exiled prince. The resemblance is too precise. Someone is making a statement. Jin investigates quietly. The source is a rogue artisan, bribed by a regional lord with lingering ambitions. The figurine is seized. The envoy dismissed. The emperor never hears about it, because Jin ensures he doesn't. Not all information reaches the throne. That's the unspoken truth of the Forbidden City. The emperor knows what the eunuchs allow him to know. It is not disobedience, it is necessity, and it is power. Meanwhile, Jin begins receiving strange notes again. Anonymous, written in the same hand as the one that mentioned the toothbrush. Each is a riddle, a clue, sometimes a warning. One reads, "The plum tree that flowers out of season is not confused, it is watched." Another, "Even shadows need light. Be careful where you shine." He suspects they come from someone within the Pavilion of Divine Scrolls, a cloistered bureau tasked with recording imperial dreams and auspicious signs. It's a fringe post, often dismissed by serious officials, but known for collecting sensitive whispers. The notes are carefully crafted, their sender intelligent and subtle. Jin does not reply, but he begins storing them, wrapping them in oil paper and hiding them beneath the stone basin in his chamber. As spring arrives, so too does a rare celestial event, a partial eclipse visible over the capital. The palace erupts in activity. Rituals, offerings, discussions of omen and fate. The emperor fasts. The empress orders special incense burned. Astrologers argue about the meaning. Some say it signals an end, others a test. Historians still debate how seriously the Ming court regarded such omens. Some insist they were symbolic excuses for political purges. Others claim the emperor once executed an entire astrological team for failing to predict a comet. Either way, everyone pretends to believe. Jin helps arrange the eclipse viewing ceremony from the Hall of Cosmic Order. He coordinates timing, seating, chants. During the event, as darkness bleeds across the sun, he watches the faces of those in power, not for fear, but for revelation. Who looks afraid? Who looks excited? He notices Tao Li standing stiff near the incense altar, sweat beading despite the cool breeze. He notices Consort Lan with her head bowed, murmuring a prayer, or perhaps just hiding a smile. That night, Jin finds a new note beneath his inkstone. When the sun hides, so do masks. Watch who speaks after. The next day, the emperor collapses briefly during morning rites. Heat stroke, they say. But the palace feels different. Edges are sharpening. The quiet is louder. Jin is summoned to a closed council of high eunuchs. 5 men, each with enough influence to reassign an entire bureau. They ask him questions, not about tasks, about people. Is Sunder still capable of managing operations? Do you believe Consort Lan overreaches her station? Does Lady Jen speak to the Empress often? Each question is an opening for betrayal. Jin answers with calm neutrality. My position does not involve such observations. He is dismissed with faint smiles. Later, Sunday tells him, "They're probing, looking for cracks. It means you're rising, or in the way." Jin doesn't feel like he's rising. He feels like he's balancing, between loyalty and self-preservation, between duty and quiet revulsion. He dreams again of water, this time not drowning the palace, but freezing it. Still, glittering, lifeless. Then, one dawn, Lu Gao's chambers are unsealed. Jin is summoned to inventory his belongings. He finds a sealed wooden box under the bed, marked only with a carved crane. Inside, scrolls, dozens of them. Personal notes, coded correspondences, records of court transactions that never appeared in official ledgers, bribes, blackmail, cover-ups. All names are intact. It's a trove of palace truth. Jin burns half of it that night. The rest he hides, carefully, with contingencies. He now holds a ledger that could dismantle lives. He wonders if that makes him a guardian or a threat, or both. By midsummer, the air in the Forbidden City turns syrup thick, scented with magnolia and sweat. Heat clings to every silk robe and jade clasp, suffocating both breath and discretion. Even the most reserved courtiers fan themselves with open impatience. Eunuchs carry buckets of ice from hidden cellars, placing them near the emperor's chamber like melting shields against exhaustion. But heat, like ambition, cannot be tamed by ritual. In this season of sluggish limbs and sharpened glances, Jin's role becomes more delicate than ever. He's now a fixture in both the logistical operations of the inner court and the secretive exchanges that grease its gears. He no longer receives orders from a single superior. Instead, he is passed between power centres like a prized but dangerous gift. Each faction wants to own him, or at least ensure he doesn't belong to the others. He learns to navigate this through one weapon alone: usefulness. To every superior, he delivers exactly what they want, never more. To Sunday, updates on ceremonial preparations. To the Empress's steward, scrolls confirming seating at the Moon Festival. To Consort Lan's proxy, a record of which Ministers send peaches and not lychees, an insult in court code. But Jin keeps his real insights locked away, inside a mind trained to forget just enough to appear harmless. It's during this high summer lull that the Emperor begins calling for Jin by name, not publicly, not with fanfare, just a discreet summons, once during a poetry recital, another time following a failed rain ritual. Jin enters quietly, kneels, and listens. The Emperor speaks in half-thoughts, referencing old dreams, lost favourites, poems that never made sense. Sometimes he asks if Jin believes the stars are real, or if dragons still sleep beneath the western hills. Jin answers with careful reverence, offering fragments of comfort wrapped in formal etiquette. One day the Emperor presses him more directly. "You hear things," he says, reclining beneath a silk canopy that fails to cool his skin. "You know who fears me. Tell me who doesn't." Jin bows lower. "All subjects revere your majesty." The Emperor snorts. "Then none do. No one reveres what they do not fear." Silence. The Emperor gestures him closer. "I had a brother once. He died, or they said he did, drowned in a pond. But I remember seeing him after. A shadow behind a curtain. Do you think he ever left? It's a madman's riddle, or a test." Jin replies, "Some shadows remain even after the sun moves on." The Emperor closes his eyes. "That's good. Write that down. Or don't. Let it drift." After that, Jin is called more often. Not for advice, not even for reports, just to listen. The Emperor's mind frays visibly. He forgets names, then faces, then entire festivals. Ministers grow anxious. The Empress quietly increases her influence through ritual proxies. Lady Jen begins fasting. Consort Lan prays louder, and somewhere behind the red-lacquered doors of the dragon study, the throne itself begins to feel less like a seat of command and more like a trap waiting to be sprung. Outside the palace, tremors echo louder. Rebellions in the provinces flicker like brush fires, put out in one region, reigniting in another. One band of disgruntled soldiers sacks a tax depot near Nanjing. Another intercepts a grain shipment bound for the capital. The court dismisses these events as temporary agitation. But Jin's own reports, from his secret network of eunuchs and scribes, paint a different picture. Coordinated unrest, fanned by some invisible hand. He begins to suspect what others fear to say aloud. Someone within the palace is feeding instability, perhaps hoping to fracture the dynasty just enough to mould it into something new. The evidence is circumstantial. A delay in messages from the south. A shipment of weapons gone missing from palace inventory. The sudden suicide of a minister who'd recently returned from the frontier. All events that could mean nothing, or everything. Jin keeps his suspicions buried, recorded only in the ciphered scrolls hidden beneath his chamber tiles. Then, one night, a scream. Not a shriek of pain or rage. A wordless, primal sound that rips through the outer court like a blade through silk. Guards swarm. Eunuchs freeze mid-step. Jin is already moving toward the sound before orders are even given. The scream came from the pavilion of whispered bells, where a low-ranking concubine had been confined for weeks after falling out of favour. Her body is found in her bath, face down, skin pale and bloated. Her attendants claim she was depressed, but Jin sees the signs: bruises, a ribbon too tight around her neck, and beneath her fingernails, powdered residue that doesn't belong to any bathing herb. An investigation is launched, quietly. The Emperor is not informed. His health too fragile, his attention unreliable. Jin is placed in charge under Sundi's indirect blessing. He moves like smoke, questioning staff, examining schedules, collecting incense logs. What he uncovers is not a murder plot, but something stranger. The concubine had been exchanging poems with someone in the Pavilion of Ancestral Echoes, a wing normally reserved for ritual elders and seasonal ceremonies. She had no clearance. The notes, encoded in calligraphy exercises, mention dreams, forbidden texts, and a phrase that repeats, "The dragon forgets, but the scales remember." The Pavilion of Ancestral Echoes is under the supervision of Tao Li. When confronted, Tao Li acts puzzled. Such a tragic girl, but you know how imagination blooms in confinement. Jin doesn't press, but he begins watching Tao more closely, tracking his movements, noting his visitors. Soon after, Tao Li requests a personal audience with the Emperor. It's denied. Instead, Jin is sent in his place as a note-taker. The meeting is brief. Tao offers tribute scrolls, discusses ritual inconsistencies, and slips in a veiled warning. Your Majesty, the people require signs, reassurance. If the heavens remain silent, the earth may answer instead. The Emperor nods vacantly, scratching his wrist. Jin later finds blood on the armrest. Another sign the end draws closer. Back in his chambers, Jin finds a new anonymous note, wedged into his ink brush holder. The tide comes not to drown, but to wash. But even a wash can erode a throne. He doesn't sleep that night. Weeks later, the Emperor disappears from public view. He misses 2 rituals, then 3. Official announcements claim he is meditating, communing with ancestral spirits undergoing purification. But the truth, whispered in stifled tones, is worse. He can no longer speak. Jin is summoned to his bedside. The Emperor lies still, his mouth open slightly, eyes darting without focus. He grips Jin's wrist but says nothing. A single tear runs down his cheek. A physician leans in. He cannot swallow, he murmurs. We prepare for transition. No formal declaration. Not yet. But power begins to move. The Empress calls a private meeting of senior eunuchs, including Jin, Sundae and Tao Li. Her face is pale but composed. There must be no disorder. The succession will follow tradition. The crown prince is young, but his advisors are in place. We must prepare. Tao Li bows. And if others disagree? The Empress doesn't flinch. Then we will remind them that the mandate of heaven does not tolerate delay. It is both a statement and a threat. Over the following days, Jin drafts messages to regional commanders, organises ceremonial gear and reviews the royal genealogy. He works longer hours, sleeps less, eats only when reminded. The city beyond the walls grows tenser, streets empty earlier, soldiers linger longer at checkpoints. The people can feel something stirring. Then one afternoon, Jin returns to his chamber and finds it ransacked. His mattress upturned, tiles displaced, the hidden ledger gone. Panic doesn't grip him. It trickles in, cold and steady. He checks his secondary cache, still intact. Whoever searched knew where to look, but not where to look next. Still, the message is clear. Someone is onto him. He receives no new notes from the anonymous hand. No strange riddles, only silence. Then, at midnight, a final note appears. The curtain falls. The actors remain. Do not forget your role. The next morning a hawk is spotted circling above the Temple of Heaven. An omen. That evening the Emperor dies, and the palace exhales. The death of an emperor in the Forbidden City does not begin with a cry or a bell. It begins with a silence. A deeper, more absolute stillness that creeps into the marble courtyards and polished halls like frost in the marrow. Every door remains shut. Every voice drops by an octave. Even the birds seem to perch more cautiously on the red-tiled roofs. Jin hears the silence long before the formal announcement is made. His first clue is the sudden disappearance of Consort Lan. The second is the absence of guards at the Pavilion of Last Fragrance. By the time the news becomes official, whispered first, then spoken in muffled ritual speech, he's already moved into action. The Emperor has died, and already factions stir. The Empress orders mourning clothes prepared, rites rehearsed, banners dyed black. She appears in public with eyes dry and face like porcelain, cold but flawless. Her composure is its own weapon. She wastes no time asserting the legitimacy of the Crown Prince, a boy of 13 with a penchant for miniature swords and silence so profound it borders on unnerving. Behind the veil of grief, however, power mutates. The senior eunuchs scramble to align with whoever will secure their rank under the new regime. Some shave their heads as symbols of devotion. Others, less pious, commission elaborate mourning poems overnight, having stored drafts just in case. Tao Li moves quickly, too quickly. Within a day he has positioned himself as the guardian of the Crown Prince's ceremonial education, a harmless title, except in a palace where rituals shape reality. By controlling the rites, he shapes the prince's image, and influences who is allowed access to the boy. It's a strategic chokehold, one even the Empress recognizes too late. Jin, meanwhile, watches the machinery shift. He's tasked with overseeing preparations for the imperial funeral, a role that grants him unparalleled access to the court's sacred logistics. Coffin specifications, ancestral offerings, mourning processions. He reviews scrolls listing every official's assigned place in the rites, down to which incense they must burn and when. It is a surreal duty, both intimate and detached. He reads reports detailing how the Emperor's body, washed with moon water and wrapped in dragon-embroidered silk, has been placed in a jade sarcophagus. The Empress insists on full regalia, despite murmurs that the Emperor in his final days was too feeble to command such honours. Some mutter that the Crown Prince should have been declared Emperor before the death, to sanctify the transition. Others insist the delay was necessary to avoid omens. Historians will later debate whether this hesitation was accidental or a calculated manoeuvre by one of the court's quieter players. Jin, as ever, remains silent. One morning he receives a note written not in code but plain court script, from Lady Jen. We should speak, alone, before the pyres are lit. He meets her that evening in the Hall of Falling Petals where lanterns flicker like dying fireflies. She sits wrapped in mourning white, her hair pinned high with a single black comb. "You've been watching Tao," she says. Jin bows. "He moves too fast, and too well." She pauses. "He's spoken with provincial envoys without the Empress's knowledge. That, in the current climate, is tantamount to treason." Jin replies cautiously, "The Empress remains firm. The rites will proceed." Lady Jen smiles faintly. "I've known you since you were barely old enough to walk without tripping over your own robe. Don't speak to me like I'm a censor." She produces a scroll from her sleeve. These are letters sent through Tao's household, not in his name, of course, but traced to his steward. They reference movements of troops near the Yellow River, unusual ones. Jin reads the scroll in the flickering light, his mind passing not just the words, but the implications. Someone, Tao, or his allies, is securing military backing. Perhaps not for a coup, not yet, but for leverage. Lady Jen continues, her voice low and urgent. "The Crown Prince is a child. The Empress plays at strength, but she's surrounded by ghosts. If Tao cements his role, the boy will grow up as a puppet." Jin does not nod, does not speak. But she sees it in his stillness. Agreement. The next day, Jin makes subtle moves. He reshuffles the funeral procession, placing key generals closer to the Empress's palanquin, reinforcing her visible support. He arranges for select ministers to receive ancient scrolls describing precedents of regency, all of which support strong female leadership during transitions. And most critically, he intercepts a message from Tao's steward intended for a retired prince in the southern estates. The message never arrives. Instead, Jin leaks its existence to a cautious but loyal censor who raises the issue in council, framing it as a question rather than an accusation. By the time the Emperor's coffin is carried to the sacred ancestral mount for interment, the balance has shifted slightly, but enough. The Empress's position stabilizes. Tao is not removed, but his momentum slows. The Crown Prince bows as scripted. The incense burns evenly, and no one dies. That night Jin walks the dark garden paths alone, the lanterns long extinguished. He reflects not on victory, but on how fragile stability is, how it must be constantly mended like fraying silk. He thinks of the Emperor's final glassy stare, the way silence has devoured the inner court. Then something unexpected happens. A guard from the outer perimeter brings a boy to him, a child, perhaps 9 or 10, dressed in rough homespun clothing, eyes wide with fear. "Found sneaking near the kitchen gates," the guard explains. The boy doesn't speak at first, but when Jin kneels before him, something softens. "I want to find my brother," he says. "He was taken here, long ago." Jin's heart stalls. A phrase flickers in his mind. "I had a name once." He brings the boy to the servants' barracks, feeds him rice and tea. No one recognizes him. No records match. He's just another lost child swept into the palace's undercurrent. But Jin can't stop thinking about him. He begins asking questions discreetly, tracing lists of eunuchs sent to frontier posts, names scratched from the registry, vanished servants. The more he searches, the more he finds. Patterns of boys taken young, never recorded, used and discarded by minor officials. Some were sold by starving families, others lured with promises of education. It's not new, it's just forgotten. He documents what he finds, adding it to a growing scroll. Not for leverage, not for exposure, just to remember. Because if no one remembers, the palace wins. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince begins speaking more, not to ministers, not to tutors, but to Jin. It starts with questions about rituals, then about history, then about his father. Was he kind? The boy asks one evening, while pretending to study calligraphy. Jin chooses his words with care. He believed in order and feared chaos. Do you? Jin doesn't answer. The boy doesn't press. They sit in silence, the scent of ink and pine in the air. Jin realizes something then, that he's no longer just a tool of the court. He is shaping something, a boy, a future. But futures in the Forbidden City are brittle things, because the night after that quiet conversation, a body is found in the garden pond. A eunuch, one of Tao Li's aides, slipped, drowned. That's the official record. But Jin sees the bruises, the missing fingernail, the ragged edge of a torn sash. Someone is sending messages again. Lady Jen goes into sudden retreat, claiming spiritual illness. The Empress increases her ceremonial visibility. Tao Li becomes ever more charming, and the Crown Prince begins sleeping with a dagger beneath his pillow. Summer wanes, and with it the illusion of peace. The Forbidden City shifts as a snake does before it sheds, glossy on the outside but tense with the threat of transformation. Underneath the calm surfaces of palace ritual and poetic courtesies, Jin feels it, the vibration of imminent change. Something is moving in the shadows, not fast, not loud, but certain. He sees it in the increased presence of guards along the eastern pavilions, in the way Tao Li begins attending rites he once deemed beneath his station, in the slow erasure of names from meeting scrolls, low-ranking eunuchs, concubines of minor standing, even a few aging scribes. People vanish. Their chambers are cleaned and repurposed before the ink is dry on the orders. Jin does not vanish. He rises. Formally, he is now first steward to the Crown Prince, a position that sounds ceremonial, but grants him near constant proximity to the future emperor. Every scroll that crosses the boy's eyes, every decree issued under his name, every pillow placed in his sleeping chamber, Jin manages them, quietly, thoroughly, invisibly. He receives gifts from ministers, sweets from consorts, even a pair of embroidered shoes from a retired general's wife, sent with a note praising his devotion to imperial order. The shoes are burned, the sweets given to the kitchen boys, the gifts are never acknowledged, not because Jin is incorruptible, but because he knows that to accept even kindness is to accept a hook. Tao Li, however, is less restrained. He has carved himself a throne of influence in the inner bureaus, exploiting the chaos of succession to insert loyalists across every ministry. He offers promotions, favours, secrets, whatever currency buys the next handhold. He dines often with key court scholars, shares poems with astrologers, and walks with generals whose boots are too polished for real campaigners. Jin tracks every move. He compiles a secondary ledger, coded of course, cataloguing not just alliances but debts, rivalries, feigned friendships. He tracks which officials send gifts to Tao's household, how frequently and of what nature. A rare vase? Simple bribery. A vial of medicine from his homeland? Probably poison, or protection from it. Despite his vigilance, the palace is too vast to catch everything. One morning, a fire breaks out in the Pavilion of Ancestral Threads. A small wing used mainly for document storage, it burns fast and quietly. No one dies, but among the ashes are records, old imperial edicts, some unsigned, others sealed but never enforced. Jin had requested those scrolls a week prior, suspecting one might contain evidence of land transfers tied to Tao Li's family estate. Too late. He attends the scene, sifting through cinders with gloved hands, the ashes still warm, the soot fine as powdered ink. No one meets his gaze. The fire is ruled accidental, a spark from incense. Jin doesn't bother to protest. Later that evening, the Crown Prince calls for him. The boy sits alone, his ceremonial scrollwork abandoned on the floor. He holds a wooden horse in one hand, a relic from his infancy. Why do they burn things? He asks without looking up. Jin answers slowly. To hide them, or to let them go. Which one are we doing? Jin doesn't reply. The silence is answer enough. The boy nods. I don't want to be afraid all the time. You don't have to be. Not yet. That yet hangs between them like a curtain. In the weeks that follow, Jin begins testing boundaries. He reshuffles eunuch assignments, moving loyal men into Tao Li's outer chambers under the pretense of structural repairs. He reopens trade with a calligraphy supplier long banned from court, one whose inks carry trace compounds that reveal fingerprints under moonlight. He sends secret messages to Lady Jen, still in retreat, asking for her opinion on ritual precedents in Regency transitions. She replies only once with a single phrase, "It is not the knife that kills, but the silence that follows." And then a shift. A provincial governor sends an unusual gift to the palace, a mechanical puppet crafted by artisans in the south. It dances when wound, its arms lifted as if in prayer. A charming novelty, except Jin recognises the design. It matches one he saw in a banned scroll recovered months ago from the burned pavilion, a scroll that spoke of coded movement and symbolic mechanics. The puppet is a message, but from whom? He stores it in his private chamber and begins decoding the movements. Every click, every pause, every limb raised in sequence. After a week, he uncovers a message. Not written in words, but numbers. Coordinates. Jin cross-references them with palace maps. They lead to a hidden cellar beneath the western garden, a chamber once used for storing winter ice, now abandoned. He visits the site under cover of night, using a maintenance key he had copied years ago. Inside, he finds a sealed trunk, its lock rusted but intact. Inside the trunk, documents, dozens of them. Handwritten notes, maps of palace guard rotations, letters implicating Tao Li's household in backdoor dealings with regional warlords. It's enough to destroy him. And yet Jin hesitates, because exposing Tao isn't just a matter of punishment, it's a matter of who inherits the void he would leave. Remove one snake and another takes its place, possibly worse, possibly dumber, possibly more violent. He brings the documents to Sun Di, now mostly retired, but still sharp beneath his age-softened features. Sun reads them slowly, then sighs. "You've built a fire that could warm or scorch the entire court." "I know. Do you have a preference?" Jin doesn't answer. That night he dreams not of fire or water, but of a courtyard filled with children, all of them faceless, all of them silent. One holds a wooden horse, another whispers a name Jin can't quite hear. The next day, Tao Li makes his move. He submits a sealed petition to the Council of Rights, proposing a shift in the Crown Prince's education, to better align with celestial expectations. It's a power grab, disguised in starlight. If passed, it would strip Jin of access to the prince's scroll work and isolate the boy from the Empress. Jin counters, not with a protest, but with a proposal. He suggests an official reading ceremony to mark the Crown Prince's transition from mourning to governance. A rare but legitimate ritual. It would place the boy at the centre of court, flanked by his chosen attendants. He drafts the programme carefully, listing his own role modestly, but undeniably close. The Empress approves it. Tao Li balks, then folds. Publicly supportive, privately fuming. The ceremony proceeds. The prince reads aloud from the classic of rites, his voice steady despite trembling hands. Jin stands behind him, silent, unreadable. That evening, Tao Li's steward is found dead in his quarters. A note in his hand reads, "For the shame I could not bear." Suicide, they say. Jin knows better. He retrieves the sealed documents from the garden cellar and burns them in the temple furnace one by one. Not because Tao is gone, he isn't, but because the message is clear. Power here is no longer absolute. It is negotiated, tempered, watched. In the weeks that follow, things settle. The Emperor smiles more in public. The Crown Prince studies harder. Tao Li grows quieter, more gracious. He loses a few allies to reassignment, gains none in return. Lady Zhen returns to court, her robes darker, her gaze heavier. And Jin? He becomes quieter than ever. He speaks only when addressed. He files fewer reports. He walks slower, but he sees everything. In the inner court, silence isn't absence. It is strategy. It is armour. It is waiting. With autumn comes a thinning of the palace air. The trees lining the walkways drop their gold-painted leaves with the precision of dancers ending a performance. Even the koi in the lotus ponds move more slowly, their orange bodies dragging under the surface like fading brushstrokes. The Forbidden City becomes hushed, reflective. But underneath that solemnity, new roles are being rehearsed, new scripts drafted. The court remains in perpetual performance, only the masks have changed. Jin now stands at the centre of that stage. Though he wears no robe embroidered with dragons, no official sash denoting authority, his influence is unquestioned. Every message passed to the Crown Prince passes through his hands. Every invitation from the Empress's office, every festival agenda, every tribute gift from provincial lords is reviewed, sorted and, when needed, altered. He is no longer a servant of the palace. He is its architect, the quiet draftsman of its equilibrium. He does not act alone. His network, once incidental, is now deliberate. Kitchen boys trained to observe moods, bath attendants who note bruises, junior scribes who mimic his cipher and memorize names others forget. He rarely speaks to them directly, but they know their signals. A dropped peach blossom on a scroll, a small ink dot on the edge of a bowl. Information flows to him like rain to a cistern, quiet, steady, and far more dangerous than anyone suspects. Not that the danger is gone, far from it. Tao Li is still present, still smooth-tongued, still wearing that expression of amused concern whenever his policies are challenged. He smiles through council sessions, compliments the Crown Prince's diction, even praises Jin for setting a fine example of restraint. But the sting beneath his flattery hasn't dulled. Tao has simply changed tactics. He begins grooming a protégé, a young eunuch named Rui Yun, pale, soft-spoken, with a talent for poetry and an eagerness that borders on reverence. Rui starts appearing at meetings Jin once attended alone. He delivers messages the Crown Prince didn't ask for, offers opinions no one requested, and yet no one objects. Rui is likeable, bright, harmless, until he isn't. Jin notices odd changes in the prince's phrasing, sentiments that echo Tao Li's worldview. Oblique references to balance over justice, to necessary compromise. He hears Rui's cadence in the boy's speech, sees it in his posture. Small shifts, but dangerous. Jin begins observing Rui closely. He notes that the boy rarely eats in public, that he takes longer routes through the garden, that his sleeves often smell faintly of a rare ink used only in the Pavilion of Naval Records, a place Rui has no access to, unless someone gave it. He places a watcher near the garden well, another in the laundry courtyard. Within a week his suspicions are confirmed. Rui is passing information, fragments of conversations, drafts of scrolls, even page counts of ciphered reports, to a messenger cloaked as a junior librarian. The scrolls are then sent to an address outside the capital. Jin doesn't act immediately. He watches. He allows Rui to continue, intercepting only the most dangerous fragments. The goal isn't to expose Rui, it's to see who receives the messages. That link leads him to a name he hadn't expected to resurface. Lord Deng, a former general exiled years ago for speaking out against eunuch influence. Supposedly retired, he's been quietly building a network of sympathisers among provincial tax collectors and disillusioned scholars. Rui is the bridge between Deng and Tao, or perhaps Rui is merely the rope stretched over that chasm. Either way, he's a liability. Jin decides the boy won't be punished. Instead, he promotes him. He petitions the Empress to reassign Rui to the Bureau of Calendar Rites, an old but prestigious post steeped in symbolism, where he'll be surrounded by the most superstitious scribes in the palace, a place where any deviation, any error in dates or omens, is treated with suspicion, where even whispers can spark demotion. Rui accepts the transfer, proud and oblivious. Tao Li, if he suspects sabotage, says nothing, but his face tightens. With Rui redirected, Jin redirects his own focus to something that has quietly haunted him for weeks. The boy from the garden, the one who claimed to be searching for his brother. The boy had been relocated to the servant nursery, given duties in the textile hall, and for a time seemed content. But lately Jin hears murmurs, strange behaviour, questions asked, too much interest in the layout of the palace. Jin investigates gently. He discovers the boy is not alone. He's been meeting at night with two other young servants, both sons of craftsmen brought in during the reconstruction of the fire-damaged pavilion. One of them is illiterate. The other carries a blade in his boot. Jin interviews the boy under the guise of casual inspection. "Do you still think your brother is here?" he asks, offering a plate of sweet lotus seeds. The boy shrugs. Maybe. Maybe he was. I just wanted to know if he ever saw the Emperor. Jin watches him closely. Why? The boy's eyes are too calm. Because some people deserve to be seen before they disappear. Jin understands then. This boy is not searching. He is remembering. Or worse, fulfilling a promise. He was sent. By whom? That remains unclear. But his presence is no accident. Jin arranges for the boy and his two companions to be transferred to a new assignment, an outpost just outside the city, under the care of a retired eunuch known for his stern discipline and lack of curiosity. He doesn't punish them. He doesn't need to. They've already served their purpose. Their removal sends a message. I see you. I see even what you haven't yet done. That message echoes back in the next moon cycle. A provincial official sends a gift to the Empress, a carved wooden screen depicting the crown prince surrounded by phoenixes. An auspicious image, except one of the phoenixes is subtly malformed. Its feathers curve inward like talons, a deliberate design, readable only to those who understand the old symbolism. The message is clear. The air is watched. The kingdom waits. Jin doesn't inform the Empress. He stores the screen in a sealed chamber, catalogued as damaged. He does, however, send a private dispatch to the governor of the province where the screen originated. The letter is brief, polite, but unmistakably a warning. Weeks pass. The governor is reassigned, quietly, permanently. The crown prince grows more confident with each passing day. He begins issuing minor edicts under the Empress's supervision, orders to repair roads, standardize measurement weights, fund temple restorations. Nothing controversial, but each one is signed in his hand, a symbol of growing independence. Jin continues to advise him, rarely offering opinions, always asking questions instead. He plants ideas like seeds. One day he asks the boy, "What do you think power is?" The crown prince thinks. "A throne?" Jin shakes his head. "A throne is only wood. Power is who gets to sit." "Then what is loyalty?" Jin smiles. "The cushion on the throne. It matters most when the seat becomes uncomfortable." The boy laughs, but the lesson stays. In time, the crown prince begins selecting his own tutors. He dismisses one who served under Tao Li's mentor. He requests a scholar once condemned for political caution. The shift is slow but unmistakable. Jin senses the court's rhythm change again. A subtle pulling inward. Not retreat. Consolidation. The palace is settling into something tighter, less forgiving, more alert. And Jin? He observes. Records. Steers. He dreams sometimes of home, though he no longer remembers what his mother's face looked like. He remembers a path between rice paddies, the smell of wet sandals, a frog, that's all. He still walks the garden before sunrise, still burns his scrolls after reading, still stores the most dangerous memories in his head, where fire and spies cannot reach. He has not spoken his birth name in years. He has no tomb prepared. But he knows one thing. He will not vanish. Not until the story is complete. The first frost appears not on the rooftops, but on the bronze mirrors of the Pavilion of Rites. It coats their surfaces with a pale breath that refuses to fade, even after the sun rises. It's a quiet warning, one that no one remarks upon, but everyone notices. In the Forbidden City, nature and omen walk hand in hand, and a chill in the mirror is never just condensation. Jin, now approaching his 24th year within these red walls, reads the frost the same way he reads subtext in a condolence scroll, or a misplaced orchid in a widow's garden, intuitively. He adjusts accordingly, requesting an emergency inventory of ceremonial tools and verifying the placement of ancestral tablets. No one questions the urgency. These days, Jin's instincts are trusted more than the court astrologers. He begins the morning in the Ministry of Rites, which, despite its lofty title, is an endless maze of paperwork, protocol, and powdered wigs. Its function is as delicate as it is dull, to interpret and enforce court etiquette, manage ritual timing, and liaise with Confucian scholars who think even the moon should ask permission before rising. Most of the ministry's senior officials dislike Jin, some because he is a eunuch, others because he is young, and many because he speaks less and sees more. Yet they tolerate him, because when a royal wedding is delayed, when an envoy's seating arrangement causes diplomatic tension, or when two ministers arrive at court in identically ranked headwear, it is Jin who resolves it without complaint or credit. This morning's challenge is relatively minor. A delegation from Museon is arriving 3 days early, citing favourable winds. Their escort has been delayed by illness, and the court musician tasked with welcoming them has gone missing. Jin reshuffles the schedule with a flick of the wrist. replaces the musician with a reliable flautist from the Imperial Orchestra, and arranges a preliminary welcome ceremony to save face. But even as he navigates these microcrises, Jin is watching something larger, the shifting influence of the Confucian elite. Traditionally, the Ministry of Rites has been a stronghold of the scholar official class, men who pride themselves on bloodline, poetry, and moral superiority. They have always viewed eunuchs with suspicion, if not outright disdain. To them, a man without family or legacy is a man without anchor, and yet, over the past 2 decades, eunuchs have outmaneuvered, outlasted, and outlived many of them. Historians still argue whether this power shift was inevitable or engineered. Some say eunuchs filled a vacuum left by corrupt officials. Others claim they exploited access to the emperor's private world. Jin would say both are true. Influence, like water, finds its way to the lowest, most hidden places. This tension surfaces during a Council of Precedence meeting, convened to finalise the rituals for the Crown Prince's impending elevation to formal adulthood. An unassuming event on paper, but a pivotal moment in palace politics. Once the Crown Prince passes this milestone, his authority, while still ceremonial, will carry greater symbolic weight, and with it, the power to endorse or dismiss. The senior Confucian on the council, Minister Q, proposes an ancient rite not performed in over a century. The sacrifice of the 5 scrolls, a purification involving public recitation and symbolic burning of philosophical texts. It is meant to remind the prince of his moral duty to heaven and earth, but it also recenters power in the scholarly tradition and marginalises the influence of non-traditional voices, meaning eunuchs. Jin listens, face calm, fingers resting lightly on the table. He waits until all have spoken. Then he offers a quiet suggestion. Would it not be more appropriate to modernise the rite, incorporating the philosophies of both North and South schools as a gesture toward unity? Minister Chu stiffens. Deviation from canon sets precedent for chaos. Jin inclines his head. So does exclusion. Harmony requires both order and adaptation. The room falls silent. Q's objection is noted but overruled. The new version is accepted. The Crown Prince's ceremony will proceed without the sacrificial burning, though incense will be burned and poems recited. After the meeting, Q corners Jin in the corridor. You mistake tolerance for triumph, the scholar hisses. Your name will not survive these scrolls, Jin bows slightly. Then I will be grateful to vanish before the ink dries. The threat is dismissed, but the sentiment lingers. Jin's influence may be deep, but it is not loved. His position is protected by necessity, not affection. One shift in favour, and he could be removed, erased, rebranded as a cautionary tale. That evening he visits the royal archive, not for work, but to reread certain edicts from the previous emperor's reign. Among them are a handful written in haste, under duress, with odd phrasing and unusual ink. He compares these to recent correspondence from regional commanders, some of whom quote old laws that were never officially enacted. It becomes clear someone has been quietly resurrecting forgotten decrees, legally meaningless, yet politically useful. He traces this campaign to a retired magistrate in the West, recently reinstated by a cousin of Minister Q. The magistrate has begun lecturing on purity of tradition and has amassed a small but fervent following. Jin adds the name to his list. Later that night he receives a package from the pavilion of the Sleeping Willow. Inside is a scroll, unsigned but unmistakably written by Lady Zhen. It reads, "A storm from the west smells of ink, not thunder." She has noticed it too. Jin takes action. He plants a brief message within the Empress's morning docket, recommending an award of recognition for regional educators promoting updated interpretations of court philosophy. It seems harmless. It isn't. By rewarding those who reinterpret tradition, it delegitimizes those clinging to its strictest forms. The Empress, wise to the dance, approves it immediately. Minister Chu responds by sponsoring a public recitation of the Analects, inviting scholars to proclaim their devotion in the imperial courtyard. Jin counters by organising a nighttime poetry reading in the Lantern Garden, featuring eunuch writers and merchant poets whose metaphors drip with veiled subversion. The battle plays out not in blood, but in scrolls, syllables, and candlelight. Jin wins, for now. The Crown Prince's elevation ceremony proceeds under new rites. He reads from old and new texts alike, bows to both Confucian sages and unnamed ancestors, and burns no scrolls, only a single sprig of sandalwood. Tao Li watches from the third row, his face blank, his fingers still. Jin watches him back. That night the Crown Prince asks Jin, "Was this what my father would have wanted?" Jin replies, "He would have wanted silence, and silence would have eaten you," the boy nods. He's growing sharper by the day, but Jin knows sharpness is not always strength. He thinks often now of the ledger hidden in the ice cellar, of the names he's recorded, the games he's played. He wonders what will become of them all when he is gone, if anyone will read his codes, understand his riddles, or care. In the end, it may not matter, because he still has a job to do, because somewhere a mirror has frozen again, and someone soon will decide to break it. A wind stirs over the rooftops of the Forbidden City, dry and restless, carrying the scent of northern dust and aging cedar. Autumn's sharpness deepens, curling the edges of prayer slips and turning lanterns brittle with cold. It is a time of change, not just in season but in pulse. The rhythm of the palace shifts again, subtly but with undeniable certainty. Something new is creeping through the corridors, something clothed in righteousness. Jin receives the first real sign not from a whisper or a coded note, but from a banquet invitation. The Ministry of Rites announces a harvest gathering to honour the Crown Prince's academic progress. It is hosted not in the traditional banquet hall, but in the South Harmony Pavilion, long unused and recently restored. That detail alone prickles Jin's instincts. The South Pavilion was once a haunt of courtiers with reformist leanings, men who vanished during the last great purge of scholars under the previous emperor. Now its reopening is framed as a celebration of renewed values and ancestral wisdom. Jin knows better. Behind every resuscitated tradition lies a political corpse being rearranged to appear alive. The guest list includes the usual high ministers, senior eunuchs, and imperial family members, but tucked among the names are several unfamiliar ones, new appointees from distant provinces, young scholars recently elevated to court positions, men with clean robes and dangerous ideals. Among them is a name Jin hasn't seen in years, Xuan, a firebrand poet once censured for satirical verses about eunuchs, now returned as Deputy Minister of Propriety. Jin attends the banquet. He wears a subdued robe, grey with black embroidery, the pattern a quiet wave design that implies both humility and vigilance. He says little, observes much. The food is impeccable. Honey duck, fried lotus root, rice wine thick with chrysanthemum. The music leans heavy on zithers and high flutes, melancholic but calculated. Even the incense is different, bitterer, sharper. The speeches begin. Minister Chu praises moral clarity. Tao Li compliments the scholars for their resilient embrace of doctrine, and then Xuan speaks, his voice smooth as oiled paper. "We honour not just a boy's growth," he says, nodding at the Crown Prince, "but the resilience of the riverbed that holds him. And if any stone clogs that river, no matter how polished, it must be dislodged for flow to resume. There is no need to look at Jin. Everyone knows who the stone is." Later, in the darkened hallway, Xuan approaches Jin with the air of a man reciting lines rehearsed long ago. "I wondered if we would ever meet in daylight," he says with a faint smile. Jin bows, expression neutral. "You've held the palace with threads and smoke," Xu continues, "but the wind is shifting. The scrolls turn faster now. Be careful you aren't caught between the pages." He leaves without waiting for a response. Jin reports the conversation to no one. Instead, he turns to the archives. He begins compiling old tribunal records, cases where scholar officials were punished for ritual deviation or doctrinal rigidity. He compares them with current appointments, noting which families are regaining traction. He charts patterns. Western provinces leaning conservative, central ones growing bolder. Someone is orchestrating ideological alignment under the guise of academic restoration. And the Crown Prince is being positioned as a figurehead for this movement. Not directly, not yet, but through the speeches written for him, the lessons selected, the advisors assigned. Jin intervenes quietly. He replaces a history tutor with a tactician known for moderate pragmatism. He schedules the Crown Prince to tour the imperial stables instead of attending a Doctrine Day seminar. He plants stories in the palace bulletin about previous emperors who relied too heavily on Confucian orthodoxy and ended their reigns embattled. But his most daring move comes late one evening, under a waxing moon. He presents the Crown Prince with a sealed scroll. "This is a banned text," Jin says simply. "Read it alone, then burn it." The boy does not ask questions. 3 days later, the Crown Prince requests that the next palace poetry competition be themed around perspective and change. Xuan withdraws from the judging panel. Minister Chu sends a letter of complaint. The Empress says nothing, only smiles barely. But Jin knows retaliation is coming. It arrives in the form of an accusation. A junior scribe, trembling and pale, reports that one of Jin's aides, an orphan eunuch named Wei, was seen altering scrolls in the Hall of Ritual Accounts. A serious offence, suggesting falsification of ritual records, a crime that could lead to imprisonment or even execution under the wrong interpretation. Jin intervenes immediately. He demands an internal inquiry. The scroll in question is found. It is untouched. The supposed alteration was a misinterpretation of a marginal note used for formatting. But the damage is done. Whispers begin. Jin's enemies do not seek to remove him by force. They aim to corrode him, to make him brittle, less trusted, less believed. He doubles down. He tightens his network, dispatches personal aides to shadow Xuan's scribes, builds connections with lesser courtiers ignored by both factions, tea merchants, robe tailors, night guards. He begins circulating rumours that a new code of etiquette is being drafted, one that may shift ceremonial precedents in favour of eunuchs who achieve philosophical enlightenment. He knows it's absurd, but the rumour spreads like ink in water. Tao Li visits him that week, unannounced. "You're destabilising things," Tao says, tone unreadable. "Even for you." Jin sips his tea. The palace has never been stable. It just holds its breath between tremors. "Not everyone thinks you belong at the centre of it." "I don't. I just belong nearby, where I can see who thinks they do." Tao sets down his cup. "You should take leave, 1 month, quietly." Jin meets his gaze. "I think you should." They part without bowing. That night Jin receives a package. Inside, a set of court shoes, identical to those once gifted to him by the general's wife years ago. But these are stained, brownish red at the heel. A message. He stores them in his trunk, then drafts a notice to the Imperial Guard. The next day he has 3 of his lower aides reassigned to the outer city on patrol duty. Not because they've failed, but because someone is testing how closely Jin protects his own. A week later, 2 of them are poisoned in a soup cart. 1 survives. Jin says nothing publicly, but he meets with the surviving aide and gives him a pouch of silver, instructing him to leave the capital for a year. "Return when you've forgotten why you left," he says. He knows he cannot afford more martyrs. The Crown Prince, now 15, calls for him late one evening. "I feel like I'm walking a path someone else drew for me," the boy says, "but every time I step off it, the map changes." Jin replies, "The only map that matters is the one they fear you'll draw." The prince studies him. "Do you fear that?" "I fear you'll stop drawing." The boy nods, then whispers, "They want you gone." Jin places a hand over his heart. "So long as you remember what I've shown you, they can't make me vanish. For now, he remains." But the palace is tightening again. The scrolls move faster, and the ink runs redder. The first signs of sickness are easy to miss in a place as layered as the Forbidden City. A faint discoloration on a sleeve, a dish returned untouched, a steward who no longer smiles at sunrise. In a court trained to disguise grief, illness hides behind powdered faces and perfumed screens, but it doesn't stay hidden for long. When the fever reaches the hall of embroidered bamboo, it begins with a whisper. The tea girl fainted. Then another. One of the seal bearers hasn't been seen for 3 days. By the time Jin hears of it, 3 concubines have taken to their beds, and a calligrapher in the Ministry of Rites has reportedly coughed blood onto a scroll meant for the Crown Prince. The palace doesn't panic, not visibly. Instead, it prepares. Healers from the inner Bureau of Remedies are summoned. Incense burners are doubled. Entry and exit points are scrubbed with vinegar and boiled herbs. Jin orders the purification bells rung, not once but 3 times, an old rite that signals both warning and containment. Ministers protest it as excessive, but no one defies it. The Empress issues a quiet directive. Anyone showing symptoms is to be isolated immediately regardless of rank. A bold move, risky, necessary. Still, the illness spreads. It has no name, at least not an official one. Some call it the silk sweat, because it clings to the skin like damp cloth. Others whisper of the clouding, referencing the milky haze that overtakes the eyes of those who don't recover. But among the eunuchs, it becomes known simply as lotus death, because it begins beautifully, flushed cheeks, sparkling eyes, before turning the body against itself. Jin receives daily reports. He charts the spread like a general watching terrain turn hostile. He sees patterns. Most victims are from the southern quarter of the inner court, near the kitchen halls and servant dormitories. Those with access to garden water seem more vulnerable. He orders the cisterns tested, then sealed. The kitchens switch to well water, brought in from outside the walls. Even the tea houses reduce their brewing. But fear is harder to contain than contagion. Attendance at court meetings drops. The poetry readings are cancelled. Offerings to the ancestors increase. The palace becomes quiet, not in reverence, but in retreat. And in that silence, something else moves. Jin begins receiving reports of strange gatherings at night. Groups of officials meeting not in council halls, but in ancestral chambers and garden corridors. They speak of cleansing and divine correction. Some believe the illness is punishment for deviation. Others say it is an opportunity to purge those who have wandered too far from traditional doctrine. At first, these are just murmurs. Then a court scholar suggests that the crown prince delay his final adulthood ceremony until the heavens grant health again. On its surface, a precaution. Beneath, a maneuver. Postponement means limbo. Limbo creates vacuum. Jin responds with ritual. He organises a dream consultation, an archaic ceremony where the crown prince records his dreams and they are interpreted by 3 appointed visionaries. It hasn't been performed in a generation, but Jin revives it with flair. In the dream, as told by the crown prince, a golden hawk flies above the palace, shedding feathers that turn into phoenixes. The visionaries declare it a sign of rebirth, a mandate for resilience. The message is clear. The prince stands firm. The court resumes, tentatively. Meanwhile, Jin grows concerned about the increasing absence of Lady Zhen. She has not appeared in public since the first week of the illness. Her pavilion is sealed, her maids rotated. When Jin inquires through intermediaries, he is told she is in prayer. But prayer doesn't write letters, and Lady Zhen always writes. He sends a trusted aide, a mute kitchen boy she once favoured, to deliver sweet rice dumplings. He returns with a note slipped into the empty tray. The lotus blooms in fog, but it is not alone. That night Jin walks the palace perimeter, cloak wrapped tight against the cold. He sees guards posted in odd places, corners once patrolled only during festivals. He sees lanterns dimmed early, and he sees 2 eunuchs from Towley's household speaking with a junior astrologer near the Hall of Painted Silence. It's not nothing. Still, he does not act. Instead, he listens, and soon the silence breaks. A high-ranking healer dies. Not of illness, but poison, delivered via a rare northern berry disguised in cough syrup. The murder is hushed, but Jin uncovers it through a coded inventory mismatch in the apothecary scrolls. He confronts Sundi, who has remained on the periphery of court politics, citing age and frailty. "I know who ordered it," Jin says. Sun sips his soup slowly. "Then you also know it was not intended for the healer. Indeed, the bottle was meant for the crown prince, but it was intercepted, accidentally. This is no longer just a sickness, it is cover." Jin moves quickly. He has the crown prince's chambers relocated without announcement. He triples the guards. He replaces every servant, every attendant, every food taster. Then he delivers a sealed scroll to the Empress, detailing not the attempted poisoning, but the pattern of small rebellions growing beneath the illness. Her response is chillingly brief. "Do what you must. Keep the throne warm." The next day, 3 officials are arrested for ritual violations. A vague charge, sufficient for removal. Their estates are seized, their families re-educated. Towley issues a formal statement of concern, urging compassion and clarity during troubled times. Xuan delivers a poem titled "Winds We Cannot See," which is printed and distributed by scribes aligned with the Ministry of Rights. Jin counters with silence, but in private he prepares. He begins assembling records, names, dates, deeds, not blackmail, insurance. Should he fall, these will be released to the right eyes. He buries copies in the Temple of the White Crane, where the monks owe him several favours. Meanwhile, the illness recedes. Whether due to isolation, weather or divine will, no one can say. But the fevers fade, the coughing stops, death withdraws. And as it does, the Crown Prince takes a step forward. He attends morning court unannounced. He requests a review of famine relief efforts in the western provinces. He publicly praises the eunuchs for their unseen strength. It is a declaration, not loud, but final. Still, not everyone accepts it. A week later, Jin receives a scroll of mourning, a traditional black-ribboned notice. It is from Lady Jen's steward. Lady Jen has died. Peacefully, in prayer. No ceremony, no procession, just a brief line. She asked for no lanterns. Jin reads the scroll 3 times. He says nothing. He goes that night to her pavilion, which has already been shuttered. He finds a single scrap of parchment tucked into the windowsill. The lotus fades, but the pond remembers. He carries it back with him, burns it, watches the ash rise. Then he sleeps. Not restfully, not yet, but enough. Because he knows the court has turned again. The illness has passed, but the memory of it lingers, and Jin, more than anyone, remembers everything. A funeral in the Forbidden City is not a private thing. Even in death there are rules to follow, ranks to uphold, colours to match with virtue. When a favoured consort dies, as Lady Jen did, the ceremonies do not begin with mourning. They begin with measurements. How tall the memorial tablet should be, how wide the silk banners must stretch, how many strings of jade are required for the pavilion's threshold. Grief, here, is calibrated. But Lady Jen's funeral is different. Not because she was forgotten, on the contrary, her name echoes through chambers for days, but because she asked for simplicity. No public procession, no mourning attendants, no embroidered canopy or lacquered bier, just incense, a whispered chant, and stillness. Jin oversees every detail. Though she left no heir, no official legacy, her influence is felt in the spaces between silences, the way the Empress pauses longer during council sessions, the way the Crown Prince listens more carefully to veiled language, the way the northern wing of the court grows quieter after dusk. Lady Jen's absence becomes a presence in itself. He arranges for her ashes to be interred in the Garden of Fallen Fragrance, among plum trees just beginning their winter wither, a space typically reserved for minor attendants and anonymous palace ladies, but Jin ensures her tablet is placed slightly eastward, aligned with morning light, where she once said dreams taste sweeter. Officially, no one attends. Unofficially, over a dozen offerings appear overnight. A carved hair comb, a folded poem, a single lily carved from ivory, each one discreet, each one untouched by palace record keepers. That night Jin walks the garden alone, pausing by her resting place. He lights a taper of sandalwood and whispers her name, not her title, not her formal honorific, just the name she once shared with him under breath when she thought no one else listened. It is the closest thing to prayer he allows himself, but he doesn't linger, because even in mourning, the court moves forward. The Crown Prince is now 16. His ceremonial elevation has been completed, and his voice no longer trembles when issuing edicts. His tutors defer to him. His officials bow more deeply. Even the Empress steps back, subtly, letting the weight of ritual rest more squarely on his shoulders. Yet with visibility comes risk. The court is not made for leaders, it is made for survivors. Jin senses the shift immediately. Tao Li, long dormant since the illness, returns to public view with a campaign of curated humility. He visits temples, sponsors grain relief, hosts scholars to debate ethics under the guise of entertainment. He praises the Crown Prince in every council session. But his eyes are never on the boy. They're on the circle around him. Jin notices new faces among the eunuch ranks. Young, wide-eyed aides who watch too closely. Scribes who ask too many clarifying questions. Stewards who delay Jin's requests just long enough to test his patience. It is not a direct attack. It is erosion. He responds the only way he knows how, with control. He reasserts his influence over the scroll corridors, personally reviewing royal messages, reinstating quarterly shadow evaluations, and installing new protocols in the ink rooms to ensure seals are not tampered with. He rotates the Crown Prince's food tasters, replaces 2 of the musicians in his leisure circle, shuffles the maids, always quietly, always with reason. But the most significant move comes during a funeral. A senior official, Minister Shen, longtime opponent of eunuch involvement in government, dies unexpectedly. Natural causes, according to the apothecaries. A heart too old for northern winters. His funeral, unlike Lady Jen's, is grand, public, and full of pomp. Jin notices a curious detail in the seating arrangement. Tao-li has placed himself one rank higher than protocol allows, just beneath the Empress. When questioned, he claims it was a clerical misinterpretation. Jin says nothing, but the next morning he releases a memorandum, co-signed by the Ministry of Ceremonial Justice, clarifying the rules of mourning order, citing ancient precedents, and attaching a list of appropriate ranks. Tao-li's name is omitted, a deliberate oversight that says everything. In response, Tao hosts a poetry evening. It's attended by nearly every major court figure. Jin is not invited. He hears about it from a gardener who saw the paper lanterns reflected in the pond, heard the laughter, too loud, too polished. He attends anyway, not as a guest, but as an observer. He arrives late, dressed in dark blue silk, face unreadable. He says little, but those who see him know what his presence means. This gathering is not a coronation. It's a test, and no one likes being tested. In the days that follow, Jin accelerates his strategies. He begins grooming his own successor. Not a clone, but a shadow. A quiet boy named Ping, barely 15, sharp-eyed and loyal. He teaches him how to read intent from silence, how to interpret the shape of folded sleeves, how to deliver messages without words. He also meets with the Empress, not formally, just a walk in the Garden of Jade Steps. She speaks little. Instead, she offers him a small book, unmarked, bound in silk. Inside, names. Not enemies, not allies, just observers. People who notice too much. People who say too little. "I thought you might want to know who's watching," she says. He nods. There is nothing more dangerous than someone who observes but does not act. Among the names is one that surprises him. Xuan. The firebrand poet, now court philosopher, had receded after the illness. But now he's reappearing in unexpected places, offering commentaries on edicts, assisting with royal seals, even advising on the Crown Prince's winter rituals. Jin watches him. Xuan, to his credit, watches back. One evening they pass each other in the hallway outside the scroll archive. Neither stops, neither nods, but the glance they share is centuries old, one used by generals across battlefields, spies across tea tables, a recognition. Winter closes in. The first snow falls during a reading of the classic of mountains and seas. The Crown Prince pauses mid-line to watch it. His expression is distant, not dreamy. He's calculating something. Later he tells Jin, "The court moves like snow. Software than sudden." Jin nods. "Will I ever stop being watched?" the boy asks. Jin replies, "Only when they believe you've become them." "And if I don't?" Jin smiles faintly. "Then you will have become something they fear." The boy says nothing more, but that night he writes his own decree, for the first time without a ghostwriter. It is not a major edict, just a reallocation of funds to repair the palace library. But the wording is his, and it ends with a phrase no one expected. "Let the ink endure where the voice fades." Historians still debate whether this line was written by the Crown Prince or suggested by Jin, but either way it becomes famous. The next morning a minister resigns citing age. Another requests transfer to the provinces. A third falls ill. By the week's end, Tao-li's attendance at court becomes sporadic. Jin doesn't celebrate. He simply visits the Garden of Fallen Fragrance and lights a second taper, not in grief, but in memory, because every victory in the Forbidden City is built on absence, and the dead have the best seats to watch the living. Snow coats the stone walkways of the Forbidden City like rice flour dusting over lacquerware. White, silent, and inevitable. The roofs of the pavilions wear it proudly, edged in delicate layers, while the courtyards glow with a hushed light that comes only from winter's grip. In this season, everything appears calm, still. But those who know the palace well understand that the most treacherous movements happen in quiet. The Crown Prince holds his first winter court in the Hall of Benevolent Clarity. Jin oversees the arrangements with practiced precision. The seating, the incense, the placement of ceremonial offerings, each element designed not just for harmony but for subtle messaging. A scroll presented too early, or a cup of wine handed by the wrong steward can speak volumes. In the gallery above the court, eunuchs and record-keepers perch like hawks, ready to annotate every nod, every phrasing, every misplaced compliment. Historians will eventually refer to this winter session as the Turning, though no decree is signed, no official alliance declared. Still, the signs are there. Jin places Tao Li near the rear, an unspoken demotion. The move goes uncontested but not unnoticed. The Crown Prince opens the session not with a proclamation, but with a question. How do we balance justice with loyalty? A deliberate choice of words. The ministers offer cautious answers, quotes from Confucius, anecdotes of dynasties past, appeals to harmony. But it's the silences that matter more. Who hesitates? Who deflects? Who looks to whom before speaking? Jin watches it all. After the session, in the corridor outside the tea garden, the Crown Prince approaches him. I didn't expect answers, he says, hands tucked inside his sleeves, but I wanted them to know the question exists. Jin nods. The question is the stone. The answers are the ripples. The Crown Prince glances at the snow-covered lanterns. You said once that silence is armour. I think now it's also a weapon. And like all weapons, Jin replies, it cuts both ways. That evening, a private envoy from the western provinces arrives bearing a simple gift. A bronze mirror, etched with phoenixes circling a mountain. Jin recognises the shape. It's a cipher, used once by Lord Deng, the exiled general thought long silenced. Inside the mirror's velvet-lined box is a sliver of parchment, a date, a name, the date, the night of the New Year's festival, the name, a commander from the Imperial Guard. It's not enough to act on, but it's more than rumour. Someone intends to disrupt the upcoming festival, and likely the court itself, perhaps not with violence, perhaps with something worse, an accusation, a forged decree, a betrayal timed to coincide with celebration. The New Year's festival is a fragile moment in the calendar, where old and new balance on ceremony. The entire palace opens for a single night of spectacle. Lanterns, performances, tributes, firelight. It is the perfect time for misdirection. Jin begins to prepare. He quietly rotates guards in the western barracks. He installs additional scribes in the scroll pavilion to monitor outgoing documents. He has the incense storeroom sealed, citing contamination concerns. Most importantly, he arranges for the Crown Prince to attend the celebration from the eastern pavilion, not the central one. No announcement is made. On the day of the festival, the palace glows. Ribbons flutter from rooftops. Lanterns shaped like cranes bob in the breeze. Courtiers wear robes of crimson and gold. Musicians line the walkways, playing flutes carved from aged bamboo. Everything appears in place. But beneath the surface, the game is in motion. Jin stations his aides strategically, some among the actors, others in the kitchens, two disguised as servants pouring wine for high ministers. He watches from above, eyes moving faster than his pulse. Just after sunset, a courier attempts to deliver a sealed scroll to the Pavilion of Harmonious Purity. The courier claims it's from the Ministry of War, but the seal is smudged. The message inside references troop movements, ones that haven't been discussed in months. The courier is detained. An interrogation reveals a simple truth. He was paid by someone wearing a servant's crest, instructed to hand over the scroll during the fireworks display. A decoy, designed to cause panic, not damage. But it's enough. Jin acts. He dispatches a coded signal through his aides. 3 sharp claps, followed by a staggered dismissal of several high ministers under the pretense of illness. One by one, the outer targets of the plot lose their witnesses. Then he turns to the Crown Prince, calmly seated, watching the festivities. Someone wished for you to see only the colours, not the hands setting them. The boy tilts his head. Did I miss the performance? Jin offers a faint smile. You are the performance? The remainder of the evening passes without incident. No explosions, no shouting, no arrests, just snow falling over silk awnings and the quiet shuffling of performers exiting the stage. The next morning Jin meets with the Empress privately. She offers him tea. He does not drink it. There will be no trial, she asks. No need, he replies. The audience has already left. She nods. Then let the curtain fall. By week's end, the commander mentioned in the ciphered message resigns due to chronic leg pain. A handful of lesser officials request transfers to regional posts. Xuan disappears from public view. No one investigates, because no one needs to. The court understands the message, the game is still being played, and the board is still Jin's. Yet Jin feels no triumph. He returns to the Garden of Fallen Fragrance and finds a single footprint in the snow. Too small for an adult, too fresh for coincidence. A child, a servant, a message. He waits. Nothing follows. Later that evening, a pigeon arrives from the southern outpost. A single note. They still dig. He burns it. Because truth in the Forbidden City is like oil, too slick to hold, too volatile to store. Instead, he does what he always does. He files the memory, adjusts the stage, and ensures the story continues. Because beneath every act of pageantry lies one constant truth. Someone is always watching the watchers, and Jin intends to watch the longest. The snow begins to melt in patches, slowly, reluctantly, revealing stones stained with the red ink of old prayers and the muddy footprints of runners who never stop moving. As winter yields to spring, the Forbidden City breathes a little more deeply, but never more freely. Seasons change here only in metaphor. The true weather is political, and the clouds, as ever, are thick with potential storms. Word reaches Jin from a source in the northern provinces. Military commanders have begun making inquiries about the palace's response to grain riots. Not official inquiries, those are logged, stamped, routed. These questions are quieter, less structured. Not who issued orders, but who didn't. In the Ming bureaucracy, omissions speak louder than decrees. Jin follows the whispers back to a name he knows too well. General Han Wei, commander of the 3rd Northern Garrison, known for his ceremonial discipline and rumoured for harbouring Republican leanings. Years ago, Han's cousin was executed after suggesting the throne could one day rotate among qualified men, rather than be inherited. The idea was laughed off in court, but not forgotten. Han, it seems, hasn't forgotten either. Reports indicate his soldiers have begun training at night. Nothing unusual for border units, except these drills involve palace guard formations. They're practicing suppression, not defence. Someone is preparing for something unspoken. Jin brings this to the Empress. She receives him in her private solar, the windows screened with veils of pearl. A robe embroidered with silver cranes folds around her like a shield. She listens without interruption, fingers resting on a teacup that remains untouched. When Jin finishes, she says only, "What do you require?" He replies, "Time." She nods. "Then take it, until it takes you." He spends the next weeks gathering threads, not military dispatches. That would alert too many. Instead, he listens to merchants, grain carriers, scroll binders. He learns that Han has been purchasing lacquer in unusual quantities, lacquer used for portable altars, signs of spiritual rallying. Then he finds a name that stops him. Lin Bo. A low-ranking eunuch dismissed years ago for incidental dishonour, a vague euphemism that could mean anything from theft to flirtation. Lin vanished. But now his name reappears on travel logs moving between garrisons, always a day or two before unrest spreads in local prefectures. Jin sends scouts. Within a week they find Lin alive, managing a roadside shrine along a trade route. He has grown fat and sunburnt, wearing a holy man's robes, muttering scriptures to passers-by, but his scrolls bear maps, and his prayers are transcribed in cipher. The scouts do not bring him back. They bring his books. Jin decodes them over the course of 10 nights, alone in his chamber, the scent of thawed earth leaking through the window slats. The writings are fragmented, a plan not yet executed but clear in tone, a convergence of righteous armies under the banner of restored virtue. They do not call it rebellion, but it is one. What they want is not destruction, it is reclamation, a palace stripped of eunuch authority, a throne advised by pure voices, a dynasty not overturned but reset. It's not a coup, it's a cleansing. Jin does not present the documents to the court. Instead, he creates a copy, edited, reshaped. He removes names, shifts timelines, alters language to appear as speculation rather than threat. He brings this version to Tao Li. They meet in the whispering corridor, where sound carries just enough to remind visitors of caution. "You should see this," Jin says, offering the scroll. Tao scans it, Features neutral. Where did this come from? A friend of a friend. You edited it. I protected it. They stand silently for a long moment. Then Tao says, "This could justify many things." "Only the right ones," Jin replies. Tao folds the scroll. "What are you asking for?" "Restraint." Tao's brow furrows. "You think this is a trap?" "I think it's a test. Of us." Another pause, then Tao smiles, for real this time. "You always did prefer threads over knives." Jin says nothing. Later that week, Tao delivers an impassioned address in court, urging unity and calm in light of misleading rumours of rebellion. He calls for preemptive ceremonies to reaffirm loyalty among military governors, accompanied by symbolic gifts and renewed funding for ancestral shrines. He never mentions General Han, but the message is received. Soon after, Han sends word to the palace. He will not attend the loyalty ceremony due to logistical constraints. A week later, his horse throws him. A month later, he retires. No violence. No war, just pressure, applied precisely. Jin lets the silence settle. But then, a new sound emerges. Footsteps. A boy walks into the Crown Prince's antechamber without announcing himself. He is dressed in student robes, thin and wide-eyed, no older than 13. He bows, then holds up a scroll. "I was told to deliver this to the steward." Jin accepts it. It is a page from an old poem, the characters arranged in a familiar shape. A crane with bent wings. A signature appears at the bottom. Lin Bo. Jin reads the verse aloud to himself. It's simple, barely poetry. To forget is to forgive. But to forgive is to fall asleep, and I am very awake. There is no call to action, no threat, only a reminder that somewhere, someone still remembers. He dismisses the boy with a piece of dried persimmon. Then he visits the scroll archive, where he retrieves a box long untouched, sealed with black lacquer. Inside are the names of those once assigned to a unit that no longer exists. The Cloak Bureau, a phantom branch that managed rumours and illusions during the last Imperial shift. He finds a name scratched out, Lin Bo, but beside it, barely legible, a final note. Clever, not loyal. Jin closes the box, returns it, and walks into the northern courtyard, where new servants are planting spring orchids in the planters that once held firewood. The Crown Prince arrives minutes later, robe light, smile easy. Jin bows. "You look tired," the boy says. "I'm alive." The prince nods. Then that's enough. They walk the path together in silence, and behind them, for a moment, there is no one watching. The air thickens with the scent of plum blossoms and old ink. Spring has arrived in full bloom, and with it, the last rites of the Emperor's legacy. Though he's been gone for more than a year, his shadow still lingers, etched into ceremonial routines, embedded in courtiers' postures, echoing in every invocation of as decreed by the late Son of Heaven. His presence is less spirit than scaffolding, and Jin knows better than anyone how hollow scaffolding can become. The Crown Prince now sits on the edge of power, no longer just heir in name, but ruler in practice. He leads court meetings, reviews border reports, makes decisions that ripple across thousands of miles. But the most critical moment of all, his formal enthronement, is yet to come. That, Jin knows, is the moment everything could unravel. In the Hall of Auspicious Radiance, preparations begin for the coronation. It is a ritual measured in syllables and scrolls. The proper phrases must be used, the banners must align with the 8 celestial virtues, the music must echo the tone of the founding emperor's era. Every step has precedent, every mistake has consequence, and somewhere beneath the ceremony's polished surface, ambition hides, waiting for a misstep, a delayed drumbeat, a seal affixed at the wrong hour. The list of invitees stretches over 6 scrolls. Jin revises it himself 4 times. He moves General Yu to a less prominent position, replaces a controversial monk with a Confucian historian, reduces the foreign envoy's delegation size subtly, citing spatial concerns. It's not about insult, it's about optics. Visibility, or the lack of it, means everything. Then comes the harder part, succession confirmation. An enthronement, however ceremonial, is also a declaration of who comes next. The ministers want assurance, the Empress wants security, the Crown Prince wants neither. He wants freedom. Jin suggests compromise. A decree is drafted affirming the lineage but postponing any formal designation of an heir. It is framed as a gesture of humility, allowing heaven to signal the proper time. It buys years, maybe decades. Next, Jin turns his attention to something less ceremonial. Defence. The palace guard must be reshuffled before the coronation. Not replaced, too obvious, just adjusted. Commanders are reassigned to new wings. Foot soldiers swapped between shifts. Archers rotated through training exercises just distant enough from the main hall. One night he finds a memo on his desk, unstamped, unsigned. One sentence: "They still remember what your silence sounds like." Jin burns the paper, but not before copying the handwriting. He spends the following days reviewing servant rosters, calligraphy logs, and dismissed aid records. He narrows it down to a single possibility: a former steward of the Pavilion of Sealed Waters, dismissed after the ink theft scandal, disappeared into service under Tao Li's supervision. Another ghost, another watcher, and another reason to increase his own vigilance. Tao Li, for his part, remains outwardly cooperative. He praises the Crown Prince's vision, supports the Empress's ritual reforms, declines speaking roles at the coronation. Too perfect. Jin assigns a courier to follow his household shipments. Within 3 days they uncover something unusual. An order for white mourning robes, dozens of them, intended for a supposed funeral in the countryside, but no such funeral exists. Jin interprets it not as a plan for mourning, but a plan for deception. Mourning robes grant access. They hide identities. In a city trained to bow before death, they're perfect camouflage. He makes no move. Instead, he places lanterns near the Pavilion of Purity, 3 on the night before the coronation. It's an old code. Plans known. Act wisely. The robes never leave Tao's storeroom. The morning of the enthronement dawns clear, the sky an impossible blue. The sound of temple bells rolls across the rooftops like waves breaking in slow motion. Jin walks the halls at sunrise, making his final rounds. He adjusts a ceremonial curtain, repositions a minister by 3 steps, requests an extra braid in the Crown Prince's robe tassel, not for style, but as a coded symbol of celestial harmony restored. The ceremony proceeds flawlessly. The Crown Prince bows to the ancestors, to the court, to heaven. He reads the prepared vow, though halfway through he deviates. "I will lead not only in tradition," he says, voice steady, "but in trust. Not only through the past, but toward what is still becoming." A pause ripples through the courtyard. Jin does not move. The Empress blinks slowly, and Tao Li smiles. Not the crooked, knowing smirk of a man playing a game, but the faint, worn smile of someone who knows they've lost gracefully. When the final drum sounds, the palace exhales. Jin's task is not over, but a chapter is closed. In the days that follow, something unexpected happens. Officials begin requesting meetings, not with the new emperor, but with Jin. They want guidance on interpretations of new edicts, opinions on old customs. He becomes not just an administrator, but a touchstone. He receives a letter from a monk in the southern provinces. "We heard the drums even here. They said your silence taught the emperor how to speak." He does not reply, but he copies the letter and stores it in a plain box marked unsent. Tao Li retires. No scandal, no exile. Just a letter of gratitude, a final bow, and a seat granted at a temple near the border. He writes Jin only once, months later. "You were always a better playwright than I gave you credit for." Xuan vanishes again. This time, properly. Jin receives a scroll of farewell poetry, written in the voice of a willow tree watching seasons pass. The Empress fades from public life, taking on more spiritual duties, fewer council roles. She visits the Palace of Echoing Bells each morning, where Jin sometimes joins her, never speaking, just lighting incense. And the Emperor, now 17, begins his rule with surprising balance. He commissions repairs to roads near flood-prone areas, creates a new archive for poets and merchants, keeps eunuch roles steady but reduces ceremonial redundancy. The court, for once, stabilises. Jin continues his work, not with fire but with steady hands. He becomes quieter, if possible, more efficient. His chamber is sparse, his walks longer. He no longer records everything. Some memories, he decides, are meant to be forgotten, or at least not written. One afternoon, a novice eunuch asks him if he ever wanted more. Jin replies, "I wanted less," then walks away. Later that year he revisits the Garden of Fallen Fragrance. The plum trees are in bloom again. He places a single taper at Lady Jen's memorial, then walks to the koi pond, and smiles, briefly, because for once no one follows. The palace garden hums in muted tones, blossoms swaying beneath a soft spring wind, cicadas not yet daring to break the silence. Time in the Forbidden City moves slower now, like tea cooling in a shallow cup. But for Jin, it is not peace. It is a different kind of tension, a coiled hush after too many years of motion. He wakes each morning in his appointed quarters within the quiet orchid pavilion, a space once used to house scribes but now converted into a living suite. It is neither lavish nor spare. It holds what he needs: a table, a stove, a window that faces east. Retirement, as it is offered to eunuchs who rise high and survive long, comes in the form of ornamental serenity. He's not exiled, not dismissed. He is honoured, gilded, and gently pushed out of the way. It is what he asked for, technically. He no longer attends court sessions, no longer reads scrolls bound for the emperor's eyes. He receives visitors only on request and limits his replies to 5 lines or fewer. Yet the rhythm of the palace still throbs under his feet. News reaches him, whether carried by old friends or drifting on winds through servants' mouths. The emperor rules with skill, if not brilliance. He chooses his battles, delegates wisely, and makes decisions that favour longevity over glory. He keeps the court balanced, maintains soft relations with the provinces, and refrains from the great building projects his predecessors loved so much. Some call him conservative, others cowardly. Jin calls him steady. Sometimes the emperor visits, never announced, always after dusk, no guards, just 2 servants who wait at a polite distance. The visits are short. They talk of riddles. Once the emperor asks, "What is the opposite of power?" Jin replies, "Forgetting you ever wanted it." Another time the emperor asks, "Would you do it all the same again?" Jin sips his tea, thinks for a long moment. "Only with different shoes." The emperor laughs, not as a sovereign but as a boy again, then leaves without another word. Still, beneath the surface of this quiet life, Jin remains cautious. He wakes in the night sometimes, heart racing, dreams thick with corridors he no longer walks and faces he can't remember the names of. He dreams of ink bleeding through scrolls, of footsteps that don't belong to him, of a boy by a pond who never speaks. One morning he discovers a message pinned to the wall of his compound. No signature, no markings, just 4 characters. The gate still waits. He burns the note immediately, but for the next month he triples the number of walks he takes through the outer gardens, noting every shadow, every unfamiliar glance. The gate still waits. A phrase once used among renegade eunuchs during the reign of the prior emperor, referring to the mythical second gate, a spiritual metaphor for judgment, or perhaps vengeance. He receives no further messages, but one day, while arranging a tray of medicinal herbs sent from the south, he finds a single lotus seed tucked beneath the jar. A coincidence? Maybe. But Jin stores it carefully in a small lacquer box beneath his bed, next to the other things he never speaks of. Later that year he receives an invitation, not from the emperor, from the Ministry of Ancestral Archives. They are preparing a written history of the previous emperor's final years and the current emperor's rise. They ask for his contributions. He declines. Instead, he writes a private letter. 3 pages. No names, only moments. He wraps it in silk and hides it beneath the floorboards, sealing it with wax. Not for fame, not for glory, for clarity, for the chance that someone someday might ask not what happened, but how it felt. He rarely leaves the palace. But one spring, when the orchids bloom without prompting and the river floods 2 days early, he travels to a small temple outside the city. He walks slowly. No one recognises him. An old monk offers him tea. They sit in silence for an hour. When Jin rises to leave, the monk says, "You walk like someone who used to run." Jin smiles. Not well. On the way back, he passes children playing near the edge of a stream. One boy is trying to catch frogs in a clay bowl. The others cheer. Jin watches for a while until one of the children offers him a frog with an open palm. He declines, but the image stays with him. Back at the palace, his garden has changed. New attendants tend to the flowers. One arranges the peonies too tightly. Another leaves the watering basin half filled. Jin corrects them gently, not with scolding, but with quiet example. They begin to learn. One evening, while trimming a withered orchid, he finds a folded scroll inside the pot. He opens it. There's no message, only a drawing. A crane, wings unfurled, standing atop a closed gate. He stares at it for a long time, then folds it again and places it in the same box with the lotus seed. He does not speak of it. Instead, he prepares his last will. He asks for no procession, no songs, no carved tablet. He asks only for his ashes to be scattered in the garden of fallen fragrance, not into the pond, into the soil, where the roots might take them. The emperor honours the request when the time comes. No tomb is erected, no memorial spoken, but each spring a single orchid blooms where none grew before, and those who tend it say, without knowing why, that it grows best in silence. Spring folds into summer without ceremony. The rhythms of the Forbidden City resume their gentle tyranny. Drums at dawn, scrolls at noon, incense by nightfall. And though the corridors are filled with new voices, younger stewards, and unfamiliar laughter, the architecture remains unchanged. The ghosts walk the same routes. In the garden of fallen fragrance, a single orchid continues to bloom each year at the base of the oldest plum tree. No gardener claims responsibility. No seed was ever recorded, but it returns reliably. Pale violet petals, slender stem, stubbornly alive. Most believe it a curiosity. Some say it's an omen. A few, the oldest among the eunuchs, say nothing at all, because they remember, and they understand the language of things left unspoken. The emperor is now 23. His rule, once cautious, has grown confident, if not bold. He negotiates treaties with the western tribes without bloodshed. He oversees the rebuilding of 3 major river dikes using new methods introduced by merchants from the southern coast. He establishes a school for eunuch administrators, controversial but necessary, emphasizing ethics, observation, and the craft of silence. He rules without cruelty, but also without nostalgia. On the 10th anniversary of his enthronement, he declines all celebration. Instead, he visits the garden, alone. He kneels by the blooming orchid, brushing away loose soil, revealing a flat stone beneath it, unmarked, smooth, but real. He doesn't speak. He places a folded scroll at the base of the stone. Then he stands and leaves. He returns to his duties. Elsewhere in the palace, scrolls are written, appointments made, births registered, deaths recorded. The engine continues. One day, a young eunuch named Ming, barely past 20, finds a sealed lacquer box tucked behind a false panel in his quarters. Inside, a lotus seed, a folded poem, and a note. Observe everything. Intervene only when it matters. You are not their shadow. You are their mirror. He hides the box again, tells no one, and begins to walk the palace with a slower pace, sharper eyes. In the southern provinces, a retired monk receives a gift, a silk robe with the embroidery of a single crane atop a gate. No sender, no message, but the monk weeps as he unwraps it. In the archives, the record of the previous emperor's reign remains incomplete. A page is missing, a scroll unfiled. No one can explain why. But every historian agrees on one thing. The reign of the current emperor began in quiet. But its roots were not born in silence. They were grown by someone who knew when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. Some say the eunuch who shaped that reign vanished without trace. Others say he became the orchid in the garden. But those who know, those who lived through it, those who carry the weight of unspoken debts, they know better. He didn't vanish. He let go. And in letting go, he taught everyone how to hold. And now, as the corridors of the Forbidden City fade into twilight, and the hush of centuries settles like dust upon red lacquered beams, we draw the final curtain on this long winding tale. Jin's story, like so many before him, was never one of headlines or carved monuments, but of quiet choices, of moments nested inside glances, and of lives preserved not through fame, but through intention. The world he knew, layered with silk and secrets bent by ritual, sharpened by rivalry, shifted slowly under his hands. And though he asked for nothing in the end, not even a name upon a tomb, his presence remained embedded in every act of careful governance, every moment of withheld judgment, every peaceful transition that followed. He taught that power was not possession, but patience, that influence when wielded without ego, could outlast swords. Now, listener, let the imagery soften, the colours dim, let the echoing footfalls along marble halls dissolve into mist. Picture the plum trees swaying beneath the moonlight, the petals drifting downward like old memories. The garden is still. The fan hums low, and the gates of the palace, once so heavily guarded, now drift gently open in the mind. You are safe. You are warm. And just as Jin faded from power without fear, so may you slip quietly into sleep, cradled in the folds of history, cushioned by memory, watched over by the whispering walls of a world both distant and strangely familiar,